The transformation of southern Mesopotamia from scattered settlements into the world's first urban civilization represents one of humanity's most profound achievements. During the 5th and 4th millennia BC, the marshy lowlands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers witnessed an unprecedented convergence of environmental opportunity, technological innovation, and social organization that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of human development. Archaeological excavations across the region reveal that by 4500 BC, the Ubaid period had established the foundational patterns that would define Mesopotamian civilization for millennia. The Ubaid culture, named after the typesite of Tel al-Ubaid near Ur, demonstrates sophisticated pottery traditions, architectural innovations, and settlement patterns that extended far beyond the alluvial plains of southern Mesopotamia. Ubaid pottery, characterized by its distinctive geometric designs painted in dark pigments on light-colored clay, has been discovered from the Persian Gulf to the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, indicating extensive trade networks and cultural influence. The archaeological record from sites such as Tel Essaouan and Chogamami reveals that Ubaid communities had already mastered fundamental agricultural techniques, including the cultivation of barley, wheat, and dates. These settlements featured rectangular mud brick houses arranged in organized patterns, suggesting established social hierarchies and community planning. The presence of specialized craft areas within these settlements indicates that economic specialization had begun to emerge, with certain individuals dedicating their time to pottery production, tool manufacturing, and other non-agricultural activities. The transition from the Ubaid period to the emergence of true Sumerian civilization occurred gradually, with archaeological evidence suggesting a complex interplay between indigenous development and possible migration or cultural diffusion. Excavations at key sites reveal continuity in certain cultural practices, while simultaneously documenting significant innovations in technology, architecture, and social organization. The pottery traditions show evolutionary development rather than abrupt change, with Ubaid ceramic styles gradually giving way to the more sophisticated forms associated with the Uruk period. The geographic advantages of southern Mesopotamia proved crucial to this civilizational emergence. The alluvial plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers created an environment uniquely suited to intensive agriculture and urban development. Unlike the rocky highlands to the north or the arid deserts to the west and south, these fertile lowlands received regular deposits of nutrient-rich silt from the annual flooding of both rivers. This natural fertilization process created soils of extraordinary productivity, capable of supporting dense populations when properly managed. The annual flood cycle of the Mesopotamian rivers differed significantly from that of the Nile, presenting both opportunities and challenges for early agricultural communities. The Tigris and Euphrates typically flooded during late spring and early summer, depositing their sediment loads across the plains before receding to reveal renewed agricultural land. However, the timing and intensity of these floods varied considerably from year to year, creating a more unpredictable environment than the regular Nile inundation. This variability necessitated sophisticated water management systems and encouraged the development of cooperative labour arrangements that would become hallmarks of Sumerian society. The flat topography of the alluvial plains facilitated the construction of extensive irrigation networks, while the abundance of clay provided an inexhaustible building material for both architecture and pottery production. The region's position at the confluence of major river systems also created natural transportation corridors, enabling the movement of goods and ideas across vast distances. Archaeological evidence indicates that by the late Ubaid period, communities throughout the region were participating in trade networks that extended from the Iranian plateau to the Levantine coast. The development of irrigation systems represents perhaps the most critical technological achievement of this period. Early Mesopotamian communities initially relied on simple basin irrigation, diverting floodwaters into natural or artificially created basins, where crops could be grown as the water slowly evaporated or seeped into the ground. Archaeological surveys have identified remnants of these early irrigation works, including levees, canals, and storage basins that demonstrate increasingly sophisticated engineering capabilities. The construction and maintenance of irrigation systems required unprecedented levels of cooperation among community members. Unlike rain-fed agriculture, which could be practiced by individual families or small groups, irrigation agriculture demanded coordinated labour for canal construction, synchronised planting and harvesting schedules, and equitable water distribution systems. These requirements fostered the development of administrative structures and social hierarchies that would become characteristic features of Sumerian civilization. Evidence from excavated settlements reveals the gradual emergence of specialized administrative buildings and storage facilities associated with irrigation management. At sites such as Tel Abada and Tel Es-Sawan, archaeologists have uncovered large granaries and administrative complexes that suggest centralized control over agricultural production and distribution. Seal impressions found at these sites indicate that bureaucratic system for recording and managing resources had begun to develop during the late Ubaid period. The transformation from nomadic to sedentary agricultural communities accelerated dramatically during this period. While earlier Mesopotamian populations had practiced a mixed economy combining agriculture, animal husbandry and seasonal mobility, the intensive irrigation agriculture of the alluvial plains encouraged permanent settlement. Archaeological evidence shows that settlement sizes increased significantly during the Ubaid period, with some communities growing to encompass several hectares and supporting populations in the thousands. This sedentarization process involved fundamental changes in social organization, economic practices, and material culture. Permanent settlements required more substantial architecture, leading to innovations in mud brick construction techniques and the development of standardized building modules. The need to store surplus grain for lean years encouraged the construction of large granaries and the development of preservation techniques. Population growth within fixed territories intensified social interactions and accelerated the development of complex social hierarchies. The archaeological record documents the emergence of craft specialization within these growing settlements. Pottery production became increasingly sophisticated, with specialized workshops producing vessels for specific functions, including cooking, storage, serving, and ritual purposes. Metalworking, initially limited to small copper objects, expanded to include more complex tools and decorative items. Textile production, evidenced by large numbers of spindle whorls and loom weights, became an important economic activity that may have involved the first organized workshops. The emergence of proto-urban centers during this period laid the groundwork for the spectacular urban developments of the subsequent Uruk period. Eridu, traditionally considered the oldest city in Mesopotamia, provides crucial evidence for understanding this urbanization process. Archaeological excavations at Eridu have revealed a continuous sequence of temple construction spanning more than a millennium, beginning with simple shrines in the Ubaid period and culminating in massive temple complexes during the Uruk period. The earliest levels at Eridu contained small rectangular buildings interpreted as temples, constructed using the same mud brick techniques employed for residential architecture, but distinguished by their careful orientation and internal features. These early religious structures were repeatedly rebuilt and enlarged over successive generations, suggesting the development of organized religious practices and priestly hierarchies. The continuity of sacred space at Eridu demonstrates the importance of religious institutions in early urban development and provides evidence for the gradual emergence of the complex theological systems that would characterize Sumerian civilization. Other early settlements that would later develop into major Sumerian cities also show evidence of proto-urban characteristics during this period. Tel al-Ubaid itself reveals substantial architectural remains, including large public buildings and evidence of specialized craft production. Ur, which would become one of Sumer's most important cities, shows continuous occupation from the Ubaid period onward. with early levels containing sophisticated pottery and evidence of long-distance trade connections. The site of Uruk, destined to become the world's first true city, began its remarkable development during the transition from the Ubaid to the Uruk period. While the major urban expansion at Uruk occurred during the subsequent period that bears its name, archaeological evidence indicates that significant settlement had begun by the end of the Ubaid period. Early levels at Uruk contain substantial architectural remains and evidence of specialized craft production that presage the site's later prominence. The social implications of these early urban developments were profound. As settlements grew larger and more complex, traditional kinship-based social organization proved inadequate for managing increasingly diverse populations and specialized economic activities. Archaeological evidence suggests the emergence of social stratification, with differences in house sizes, grave goods, and access to luxury items indicating the development of distinct social classes. Elite residences, distinguished by their size, construction quality, and associated artifacts, appear at multiple sites during the late Ubaid period. The development of long-distance trade networks during this period facilitated cultural exchange and technological diffusion across vast regions. Obsidian from Anatolian sources appears at Mesopotamian sites, while Mesopotamian pottery and other artifacts are found throughout the Persian Gulf region and beyond. These trade connections not only provided access to raw materials unavailable locally, but also exposed Mesopotamian communities to new ideas, technologies, and organizational models that contributed to their rapid development. Religious practices during this period show increasing complexity and standardization across the region. The ubiquity of female figurines at Ubaid sites suggests widespread goddess worship, while the consistent architectural features of early temples indicate shared religious concepts and practices. The development of religious iconography, evidenced by decorated pottery and carved seals, demonstrates the emergence of symbolic systems that would later evolve into Sumerian religious art and literature. The technological innovations of this period extended beyond agriculture and irrigation to include advances in transportation, construction, and manufacturing. The development of the potter's wheel, initially used for producing more uniform pottery, represents a crucial mechanical innovation that would later find applications in other technologies. Advances in metallurgy, evidenced by increasingly sophisticated copper tools and ornaments, laid the groundwork for the bronze-working technologies that would characterize later periods. The period from 4500 to 3500 BC thus represents a crucial phase in human development, during which the foundations of urban civilization were established in southern Mesopotamia. The combination of environmental advantages, technological innovation, and social organization created conditions that enabled the transition from village-based agricultural communities to the complex urban societies that would define Sumerian civilization. The archaeological record documents not a sudden transformation, but a gradual process of development that built upon earlier achievements while introducing revolutionary innovations in social organization, technology, and cultural expression. The transformation that began during the late Ubaid period accelerated dramatically around 3500 BC, ushering in what archaeologists term the Uruk period, a revolutionary phase that witnessed the birth of the world's first true urban civilization. This transformation centered primarily on the city of Uruk itself, located in the heart of the southern Mesopotamian alluvium, where unprecedented population concentrations and technological innovations converged to create an entirely new form of human organization. Uruk's explosive growth during this period defies easy explanation through gradual demographic increase alone. Archaeological surveys of the site reveal that the settlement expanded from a modest community of perhaps a few hundred inhabitants to a sprawling urban centre housing between 10,000 and 20,000 people within the span of several centuries. This demographic explosion required fundamental reorganisation of food production, distribution systems, and social structures on a scale never before attempted in human history. The physical expansion of Uruk can be traced through successive archaeological layers that document the construction of massive public buildings, residential quarters, and industrial areas. The earliest Urus levels show evidence of planned urban development, with wide streets laid out in geometric patterns and large public spaces that could accommodate thousands of people for religious ceremonies and administrative functions. The famous White Temple complex, constructed during the late Uruk period, exemplifies the monumental architecture that characterized this urban revolution. Built atop a massive artificial platform measuring approximately 60 by 45 metres and rising 13 metres above the surrounding plain, the White Temple dominated Uruk's skyline and served as a focal point for religious and administrative activities. The temple complex itself featured sophisticated architectural innovations, including buttressed walls, elaborate drainage systems, and carefully planned interior spaces designed for specific ritual functions. The main temple chamber contained a raised platform for religious ceremonies, while surrounding rooms housed administrative offices, storage facilities, and workshops for producing ritual objects. The entire complex was constructed using millions of mud bricks, each individually moulded and fired, representing an enormous investment of labour that could only have been mobilised through sophisticated organisational systems. Surrounding the temple precinct, residential areas reveal the emergence of distinct social classes with markedly different living standards. Elite residences constructed near the temple complex featured multiple rooms arranged around central courtyards, sophisticated drainage systems, and evidence of luxury goods including imported materials and finely crafted objects. These houses typically measured between 200 and 400 square metres, with thick walls providing both structural support and insulation against the harsh Mesopotamian climate. In contrast, the residential quarters housing Uruk's working population consisted of smaller, more densely packed dwellings averaging 50 to 100 square metres. These houses followed standardised architectural plans with rectangular rooms arranged in linear patterns, reflecting the emergence of mass housing designed to accommodate large numbers of urban workers. Despite their modest size, these residences show evidence of specialised craft production, with many containing workshops for pottery manufacturing, textile production and metalworking. The social stratification evident in Uruk's architecture reflects broader changes in Mesopotamian society during this period. The emergence of distinct social classes, including priests, administrators, craftsmen, farmers, and labourers, represented a fundamental departure from the relatively egalitarian village communities of earlier periods. This stratification was not merely economic, but encompassed religious, political, and cultural dimensions that would define Mesopotamian civilization for millennia. At the apex of this social hierarchy stood the priestly class, who controlled the temple complexes that dominated urban centres throughout the region. These religious officials wielded enormous power, managing vast agricultural estates, overseeing craft production, and conducting the religious ceremonies that legitimised the social order. Archaeological evidence from temple archives reveals that priests controlled thousands of hectares of irrigated farmland, employed hundreds of specialised workers, and maintained extensive trade networks reaching across the ancient Near East. The administrative class that emerged alongside the priesthood developed sophisticated systems for managing the complex logistics of urban life. These officials, many of whom may have been drawn from priestly families, oversaw food distribution, craft production, construction projects, and trade relationships. Their activities required new forms of record keeping that ultimately led to the invention of writing, one of humanity's most significant technological achievements. The development of specialised crafts during the Uruk period reached unprecedented levels of sophistication and organisation. Archaeological excavations have revealed extensive workshop areas where skilled artisans produced pottery, textiles, metalwork and stone carvings using techniques that represented significant advances over earlier periods. The invention of the potter's wheel around 3500 BC revolutionized ceramic production, enabling craftsmen to create vessels with perfectly symmetrical forms and consistent wall thickness. This technological innovation increased production efficiency dramatically while improving the quality and standardization of pottery products. Potter's wheels discovered at Uruk and other contemporary sites consist of heavy stone discs mounted on vertical axles, allowing potters to spin clay vessels while shaping them with their hands and simple tools. The adoption of wheel-thrown pottery required specialized training and represented a significant departure from the hand-building techniques used during earlier periods. Workshop areas containing multiple potter's wheels suggest that ceramic production had become a specialized industry, employing teams of skilled craftsmen working under centralized management. The development of sailboat technology during this period transformed transportation and trade throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Archaeological evidence from Uruk includes models and depictions of sailing vessels that represent significant advances over the simple reed boats used during earlier periods. These early sailboats featured rectangular sails made from woven textiles, allowing them to harness wind power for upstream navigation against river currents. The ability to transport heavy cargoes efficiently over long distances facilitated the development of extensive trade networks that connected Mesopotamian cities with distant regions. Metallurgy techniques also advanced significantly during the Uruk period, with craftsmen developing new methods for producing copper tools, weapons, and decorative objects. Archaeological excavations have uncovered sophisticated furnaces capable of reaching temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius, enabling the production of high-quality copper alloys. Metalworkers during this period mastered techniques including casting, hammering, and annealing that allowed them to create complex objects such as ceremonial weapons, jewellery, and ritual vessels. The organisation of metallurgical production reveals the emergence of specialised workshops operating under institutional control. Large quantities of copper, slag, and production debris found in specific areas of Uruk indicate that metalworking was concentrated in designated industrial zones, probably to control access to raw materials and manage the environmental hazards associated with high-temperature furnaces. The standardization of metal tools and weapons across multiple sites suggests that production followed established patterns and quality standards enforced by administrative authorities. Perhaps the most revolutionary development of the Uruk period was the creation of the world's earliest known writing system, the proto-cuneiform script that emerged around 3200 BC represented humanity's first systematic method for recording language in permanent form. This writing system developed from earlier token-based accounting systems used to track agricultural products and trade goods, evolving into a sophisticated method for recording complex administrative and economic information. The earliest proto-cuneiform texts, discovered in large numbers at Uruk and other contemporary sites, consist primarily of administrative records documenting transactions involving agricultural products, livestock, and manufactured goods. These tablets, made from clay and inscribed with reed styluses, contain pictographic symbols representing concrete objects such as barley, sheep, textiles, and pottery. The symbols were arranged in standardized formats that recorded quantities, recipients, and dates, enabling administrators to maintain detailed records of institutional activities. The development of proto-cuneiform writing required significant intellectual innovations, including the standardization of symbolic representations, the establishment of numerical systems, and the creation of grammatical conventions for organizing information. Scribal schools emerged within temple complexes to train the specialized personnel required to maintain these record-keeping systems. The curriculum at these early schools focused on memorizing hundreds of pictographic symbols, mastering numerical notation systems, and learning the administrative procedures that governed institutional operations. The administrative applications of early writing extended far beyond simple bookkeeping to encompass complex legal and economic relationships. Proto-cuneiform texts document land tenure arrangements, labour contracts, and trade agreements that reveal sophisticated understanding of property rights, contractual obligations, and commercial practices. These records provide unprecedented insights into the economic foundations of early urban society, documenting the emergence of markets, wage labour, and private property ownership. The invention of writing also facilitated the development of more complex administrative hierarchies within Mesopotamian institutions. Written records enabled supervisors to monitor the activities of subordinates across vast agricultural estates and craft workshops, while standardized accounting procedures ensured consistency in resource management. The ability to maintain permanent records of past transactions and decisions provided institutional memory that enhanced administrative efficiency and enabled long-term planning. The technological and social innovations of the Uruk period spread rapidly throughout Mesopotamia and beyond, creating what archaeologists term the Uruk expansion. Sites across the region show evidence of Uruk-style material culture, architectural techniques, and administrative practices, suggesting either direct colonization by Uruk populations or intensive cultural exchange that transmitted these innovations across vast distances. Excavations at sites such as Habuba Kabira in Syria and Godin Tepe in Iran reveal Uruk-style pottery, architecture, and administrative technologies that demonstrate the far-reaching influence of this urban revolution. The mechanisms underlying the Uruk expansion remain subjects of scholarly debate, with some archaeologists proposing direct migration of Uruk populations seeking new agricultural lands or trade opportunities, while others favour models emphasising cultural diffusion through trade networks and diplomatic contacts. Archaeological evidence supports elements of both interpretations, suggesting that the expansion involved complex interactions between migration, trade, and cultural exchange that varied according to local conditions and geographical factors. The economic foundations of Uruk society rested on intensive agricultural production managed through sophisticated irrigation systems that represented significant advances over earlier water management techniques. Archaeological surveys have documented extensive canal networks radiating outward from major urban centres, including primary channels capable of carrying enormous volumes of water and secondary distribution systems that delivered irrigation water to individual fields. The construction and maintenance of these systems required coordinated labour, involving thousands of workers operating under centralised direction. The agricultural productivity achieved through these irrigation systems enabled Mesopotamian cities to support unprecedented population densities, while freeing substantial portions of the workforce for non-agricultural activities. Textual evidence from later periods suggests that successful irrigation agriculture could produce crop yields sufficient to support 10 to 15 people for each agricultural worker, creating the economic surplus necessary to sustain large populations of craftsmen, administrators, priests and other specialists. The management of irrigation systems also fostered the development of complex legal and administrative institutions designed to regulate water rights, coordinate maintenance activities, and resolve disputes between competing users. Early legal texts document elaborate procedures for allocating irrigation water, assessing maintenance obligations, and punishing violations of water management regulations. These institutional innovations established precedents for the sophisticated legal systems that would characterize later Mesopotamian civilizations. The administrative demands of managing increasingly complex urban societies during the late Uruk period had already necessitated the development of proto-cuneiform writing, but the centuries following 3100 BC witnessed a remarkable transformation of this early recording system into something far more sophisticated and versatile. The pictographic symbols that had served adequately for basic accounting and inventory management evolved into a flexible writing system capable of representing abstract concepts, grammatical relationships, and eventually complete literary compositions. This evolution occurred through a gradual process of symbolic abstraction and phonetic development that fundamentally altered the nature of written communication. The earliest proto-cuneiform signs were essentially stylized drawings of concrete objects. A barley stalk represented grain, a human head indicated a person, and a triangular shape denoted a female animal. These pictographic symbols served their purpose for recording quantities and basic transactions, but they proved inadequate for expressing more complex ideas or capturing the nuances of spoken language. The breakthrough came when scribes began using existing symbols to represent sounds rather than just objects, a development that linguists call the rebus principle. A sign originally representing the word tie could also be used to write the syllable tie in any context, regardless of meaning. This phonetic application allowed scribes to write words that had no obvious pictographic representation, including abstract concepts, proper names, and grammatical particles that were essential for recording complete sentences. The physical appearance of the script itself underwent dramatic changes during this period. The curved lines and naturalistic details of early pictographs gradually gave way to combinations of wedge-shaped marks impressed into clay tablets using reed styluses. This transformation occurred partly for practical reasons. Curved lines were difficult to draw in clay and often became distorted during the drying process, but the standardization of wedge-shaped marks also reflected the growing professionalization of scribal practice. Scribes discovered that a reed stylus cut to create a triangular tip could produce two basic types of marks: horizontal and vertical wedges created by pressing the stylus into the clay at different angles, and diagonal marks formed by dragging the stylus across the surface. By combining these basic elements in various patterns, scribes could create hundreds of distinct signs, each representing specific words, syllables, or concepts. The systematic organization of these wedge-shaped marks gave the writing system its modern name cuneiform, derived from the Latin word cuneus, meaning wedge. The standardization of cuneiform signs required extensive coordination among scribes working in different institutions and cities throughout Mesopotamia. Archaeological evidence suggests that this coordination occurred through the establishment of scribal schools that maintained consistent teaching methods and sign lists across wide geographical areas. Excavations at Ur, Nippur, and other major centres have uncovered school tablets containing practice exercises, sign lists, and model compositions that demonstrate remarkably uniform approaches to scribal education. These early scribal schools were typically located within temple complexes, reflecting the close association between writing and religious institutions that characterized early Mesopotamian society. The curriculum at these schools extended far beyond basic literacy to encompass mathematics, law, literature, and religious knowledge that prepared students for careers in temple administration, royal bureaucracy, or private commercial enterprises. Students began their education by copying simple sign lists and gradually progressed to more complex texts, including mathematical problems, legal formulas, and literary compositions. The process of learning cuneiform was extraordinarily demanding, requiring students to memorize hundreds of signs along with their various meanings and phonetic values. Many cuneiform signs could represent multiple words or syllables depending on context, while some concepts required combinations of several signs to express accurately. Master scribes developed sophisticated teaching methods, including mnemonic devices, practice sequences, and standardized exercises that help students navigate these complexities. Archaeological excavations at the ancient city of Nippur have revealed extensive archives of school tablets that provide detailed insights into Sumerian educational practices during this period. These tablets include student exercises showing repeated copying of sign lists, mathematical calculations, and literary excerpts marked with corrections by instructors. The progression of exercises from simple signs to complex compositions demonstrates a carefully structured curriculum designed to develop both technical proficiency and cultural knowledge. The establishment of professional scribal schools created a new social class of literate specialists who wielded considerable influence within Mesopotamian society. These scribes served not only as record keepers and administrators, but also as interpreters of law, composers of literature, and guardians of cultural traditions. Their specialized knowledge made them indispensable to rulers, merchants, and religious institutions, while their ability to read and write gave them access to information and opportunities unavailable to the illiterate majority. The expansion of cuneiform beyond basic administrative functions opened new possibilities for literary expression that had never before existed in human culture. The earliest literary compositions in cuneiform include hymns praising gods and rulers, mythological narratives explaining natural phenomena, and wisdom literature offering moral and practical guidance. These texts represent humanity's first attempts to preserve complex cultural knowledge in permanent written form, marking a revolutionary development in the transmission of ideas across generations. Religious texts formed a particularly important category of early cuneiform literature, serving both practical and spiritual functions within temple communities. Hymns and prayers written in cuneiform provided standardized liturgical texts for religious ceremonies, while mythological narratives preserved theological concepts and ritual knowledge. The famous composition known as the Kesh Temple Hymn, dating to around 2600 BC, exemplifies this early religious literature with its elaborate praise of the goddess Ninhursag and detailed descriptions of temple architecture and ritual practices. Legal documents represent another crucial development in early cuneiform literature, documenting the emergence of sophisticated legal systems that governed property rights, commercial transactions, and social relationships. These texts include contracts for land sales, marriage agreements, adoption records, and court decisions that reveal complex understanding of legal principles and procedures. The Code of Ur-Nammu, though dating to a slightly later period, builds upon legal traditions that can be traced back to these early cuneiform documents. The administrative applications of cuneiform expanded dramatically during this period to encompass virtually every aspect of institutional management. Temple archives from sites such as Gersu and Umma contain thousands of tablets documenting agricultural production, craft manufacturing, trade relationships, and personnel management with unprecedented detail. These records reveal sophisticated accounting systems that tracked resources from initial production through final distribution, enabling administrators to monitor efficiency, prevent fraud, and plan for future needs. The complexity of these administrative systems required the development of standardized formats and procedures that could be understood by scribes working in different institutions and time periods. Cuneiform tablets typically followed established conventions for organizing information, with standard formulas for dates, quantities, and participant identification. This standardization enabled the creation of comprehensive archives that could be consulted years or decades after their initial creation, providing institutional memory that enhanced administrative efficiency. The spread of cuneiform writing beyond its Sumerian origins represents one of the most significant cultural developments of the 3rd millennium BC. Neighbouring peoples, including the Akkadians, Elamites, and various groups in Syria and Anatolia, adapted the cuneiform system to write their own languages, demonstrating the script's flexibility and utility for diverse linguistic communities. This adaptation process required considerable innovation, as cuneiform had been designed specifically for Sumerian and needed modification to accommodate the grammatical structures and sound systems of other languages. The Akkadian adaptation of cuneiform, which occurred around 2500 BC, illustrates both the challenges and opportunities involved in this cross-linguistic transmission. Akkadian belonged to the Semitic language family and possessed grammatical features, including root and pattern morphology and trilateral consonant clusters that differed significantly from Sumerian structure. Akkadian scribes solved these problems by using cuneiform signs, primarily for their phonetic values, while developing new conventions for representing Semitic grammatical features. The successful adaptation of cuneiform for Akkadian opened possibilities for its use throughout the ancient Near East, as Akkadian became the lingua franca of international diplomacy and trade during the second millennium BC. Archaeological discoveries at sites from Egypt to Iran have revealed cuneiform tablets, written in Akkadian, demonstrating the script's role in facilitating communication across vast cultural and linguistic boundaries. The famous Amarna letters, discovered in Egypt and dating to the 14th century BC, exemplify this international use of cuneiform for diplomatic correspondence. The technological aspects of cuneiform writing involve sophisticated understanding of clay preparation, tablet formation, and preservation techniques that enable the creation of durable records. Scribes learn to select appropriate clay types, add tempering materials to prevent cracking, and control drying conditions to ensure tablet durability. The largest tablets, used for important legal documents or literary compositions, required careful engineering to prevent structural failure during the writing and drying process. The physical act of writing cuneiform demanded considerable skill and stamina, as scribes had to maintain consistent pressure and angle while impressing hundreds of wedge-shaped marks into clay surfaces. Professional scribes developed distinctive handwriting styles that can sometimes be identified across multiple tablets, suggesting individual artistic expression within the constraints of standardized sign forms. The speed and accuracy required for professional scribal work necessitated years of practice and continuous refinement of technique. The preservation of cuneiform tablets occurred through both intentional and accidental processes that have enabled modern scholars to recover vast amounts of information about ancient Mesopotamian society. Many tablets were deliberately fired in kilns to create permanent records for important legal or religious documents, while others survived because they were accidentally baked during building fires or military destructions. The durability of fired clay tablets has made cuneiform one of the best preserved writing systems from the ancient world, with hundreds of thousands of tablets housed in museums and research institutions worldwide. The intellectual achievements represented by early cuneiform literature extend beyond mere record-keeping to encompass sophisticated philosophical and literary expression. Compositions such as the Instructions of Ptahhotep and various Sumerian proverb collections demonstrate complex understanding of human nature, social relationships, and moral principles that rival the wisdom literature of any ancient civilization. These texts reveal that Mesopotamian scribes were not merely technicians, but intellectuals who used writing to explore fundamental questions about human existence and social organization. The economic implications of widespread literacy, though limited to a small percentage of the population, transformed commercial practices throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Written contracts enabled more complex business relationships, while standardized accounting methods facilitated trade across cultural and linguistic boundaries. The development of banking and credit systems during this period depended heavily on written records that could document transactions and enforce agreements over extended time periods. The sophisticated administrative and literary achievements of the late Uruk period created the foundation for an entirely new form of political organization that would define Mesopotamian civilization for the next millennium. As the centralized authority that had characterized Uruk's dominance began to fragment around 2900 BC, the fertile alluvium between the Tigris and Euphrates witnessed the emergence of independent city-states, each controlling its surrounding agricultural territory and asserting divine legitimacy for its rulers. This transformation marked the beginning of the early dynastic period, during which the fundamental patterns of Mesopotamian political, religious and social organization crystallized into forms that would endure for centuries. The archaeological record reveals that this political fragmentation occurred gradually rather than through sudden collapse or conquest. Excavations at major urban centres show continuous occupation and development throughout the transition from the Uruk to early dynastic periods, suggesting that the emergence of independent city-states represented an evolution of existing political structures rather than their destruction. The massive public works projects and monumental architecture that characterize this period indicate that these newly independent cities commanded substantial resources and maintained sophisticated administrative capabilities. Ur emerged as one of the most prominent of these early city-states, its position near the Persian Gulf providing strategic advantages for both maritime trade and agricultural production. Archaeological excavations in the earliest levels of the royal cemetery at Ur have revealed evidence of elaborate burial practices and sophisticated metalworking techniques that demonstrate the city's wealth and cultural sophistication during this period. The famous standard of Ur, though dating to a slightly later phase of the early dynastic period, illustrates artistic and technological traditions that originated during these formative centuries. The urban layout of early dynastic Ur reveals careful planning designed to accommodate both religious and administrative functions, while managing the practical challenges of housing a large population. The city's central temple complex, dedicated to the moon god Nana, dominated the urban landscape from an artificial platform that elevated it above the surrounding residential and commercial districts. This elevated position served both practical and symbolic purposes, protecting the sacred precinct from flooding while demonstrating the god's supremacy over human affairs. Residential areas in early dynastic Ur were organised into distinct neighbourhoods that reflected social stratification and occupational specialisation. Elite quarters near the temple complex featured large houses built around central courtyards, with multiple rooms serving specialised functions including reception areas, private chambers, storage facilities and workshops. These residences typically measured between 300 and 500 square metres and were constructed using high-quality fired bricks that provided superior durability and weather resistance compared to the sun-dried bricks used for more modest dwellings. Craft production areas within Ur were concentrated in specific districts that facilitated both resource management and quality control. Archaeological excavations have revealed extensive workshops for pottery production, metalworking, textile manufacturing and stone carving that employed hundreds of specialised artisans. The organisation of these workshops suggests centralised management, with standardised production techniques and quality standards that enabled Ur to compete effectively in regional markets for manufactured goods. Uruk itself continued to function as a major city-state despite losing its position as the dominant regional power. The city's extensive agricultural hinterland and established trade networks enabled it to maintain prosperity while adapting to the new political landscape of competing city-states. Archaeological evidence from early dynastic levels at Uruk reveals continued construction of monumental architecture and expansion of residential areas, indicating sustained population growth and economic vitality. The transformation of Uruk's political structure during this period involved the development of new institutions designed to manage both internal governance and external relations with neighbouring city-states. The emergence of distinct administrative districts within the city reflects specialisation of governmental functions, with separate areas dedicated to religious administration, military organisation, judicial proceedings, and commercial regulation. This institutional differentiation represented a significant advance over the more unified temple-palace complexes that had characterised earlier periods. Lagash developed into another major early dynastic city-state, its location in the heart of the southern alluvium, providing access to some of Mesopotamia's most productive agricultural land. The city's rulers invested heavily in irrigation infrastructure, constructing elaborate canal systems that extended their agricultural territory and increased crop yields. Archaeological surveys have documented these early irrigation works, including primary canals capable of carrying enormous volumes of water and sophisticated distribution systems that delivered irrigation water to thousands of individual fields. The administrative archives from early dynastic Lagash, though fragmentary compared to later periods, provide crucial insights into the economic foundations of city-state governance. These records document the management of vast agricultural estates, the organisation of craft production, and the regulation of trade relationships that sustained the city's prosperity. The complexity of these administrative systems required large numbers of literate officials, contributing to the expansion of scribal education and the development of more sophisticated record-keeping techniques. Religious institutions at Lagash played central roles in both spiritual and temporal governance, with temple complexes serving as administrative centres for managing agricultural production, craft manufacturing and trade relationships. The city's patron deity, Ningirsu, was understood to own the agricultural land surrounding the city, with human rulers serving as divine stewards responsible for managing these sacred estates. This theological framework provided religious legitimacy for political authority, while creating institutional mechanisms for coordinating economic activities across large territories. Nippur occupied a unique position within the emerging system of city-states as the religious centre of Sumerian civilization. The city housed the Temple of Enlil, the supreme god of the Sumerian pantheon, making Nippur a pilgrimage destination and religious authority that transcended local political boundaries. Archaeological excavations at the Enlil temple complex have revealed continuous construction and renovation activities throughout the early dynastic period, demonstrating the site's enduring religious significance and the resources devoted to maintaining its sacred functions. The religious authority of Nippur created opportunities for the city to serve as a mediator in disputes between other city-states, while its sacred status provided protection from military attack. Rulers from throughout Mesopotamia made pilgrimages to Nippur and contributed to the maintenance of its temples, creating a network of religious obligations that facilitated diplomatic communication and cultural exchange. The standardization of religious practices across different city-states owed much to Nippur's role as a centre for priestly education and theological development. Kish emerged as a powerful city-state in the northern part of the alluvium, its strategic position controlling access routes between Mesopotamia and the Iranian highlands, providing advantages for both trade and military activities. Archaeological evidence from early dynastic Kish reveals substantial fortification works and military installations that reflect the city's role in defending Mesopotamian territory against incursions from highland peoples. The rulers of Kish adopted the title King of Kish, which became synonymous with hegemony over northern Mesopotamia and was claimed by later rulers seeking to legitimize their authority over multiple city-states. The military capabilities developed by Kish during this period included innovations in weaponry, fortification design, and tactical organization that influenced warfare throughout the ancient Near East. Archaeological excavations have uncovered workshops for producing bronze weapons, including spearheads, axe blades, and arrowheads that demonstrate advanced metallurgical techniques. The standardization of weapon design suggests organized military production under centralized control, enabling Kish to equip large armies with uniform, high-quality equipment. The concept of divine kingship that emerged during the early dynastic period represented a fundamental transformation in political ideology that reconciled human authority with religious belief systems. This development involved the creation of new royal titles and ceremonial practices that distinguished rulers from ordinary mortals while maintaining their accountability to divine powers. The evolution of kingship ideology can be traced through royal inscriptions, artistic representations, and architectural projects that demonstrate increasingly sophisticated understanding of political legitimacy and religious authority. The title Ensi originally designated a temple administrator or high priest responsible for managing divine estates and conducting religious ceremonies. During the early dynastic period, this title evolved to encompass broader governmental responsibilities, with Ensi rulers serving as both religious leaders and political administrators for their city-states. The Ensi maintained direct responsibility to the patron deity of their city, receiving divine authority through elaborate installation ceremonies that confirmed their legitimacy and defined their obligations. Archaeological evidence for Ensi installation ceremonies includes specialized ritual objects, ceremonial architecture, and artistic representations that reveal the complexity of these religious and political events. The famous Warka vase from Uruk, though predating the early dynastic period, illustrates ceremonial traditions that continue to influence royal installation practices. These ceremonies typically involved ritual purification, divine investiture, and public proclamation of the new ruler's authority, creating powerful symbolic associations between human leadership and divine approval. The title Lugal, meaning great man, emerged during this period to designate military leaders who achieved authority through successful warfare rather than religious appointment. Lugal rulers typically gained power during periods of external threat or internal conflict, when military leadership became more important than religious administration. The tension between NC and Lugal authority created dynamic political situations in which religious and military leaders competed for control while seeking to maintain legitimacy within established cultural frameworks. The relationship between NC and Lugal authority varied significantly among different city-states and historical periods, with some rulers successfully combining both titles while others faced challenges from competing claimants. Archaeological evidence suggests that successful rulers often invested heavily in both religious and military institutions, constructing temples to demonstrate piety while building fortifications to display strength. The balance between these different sources of authority became a central theme in Mesopotamian political development throughout the early dynastic period. The construction of the first true ziggurats during this period represented both architectural innovation and religious evolution that would define Mesopotamian sacred architecture for millennia. These massive step towers evolved from the elevated temple platforms of earlier periods, but achieved unprecedented scale and architectural sophistication. The White Temple at Uruk, built during the late Uruk period, provided a prototype for ziggurat development, but early dynastic architects expanded upon this foundation to create even more impressive structures. The ziggurat at though rebuilt multiple times during later periods, originated during the early dynastic period as a stepped platform supporting the temple of the moon god Nana. Archaeological excavations have revealed the foundations of this early structure, demonstrating construction techniques that required precise engineering and enormous labour investments. The ziggurat's stepped profile was achieved through the construction of successive platforms, each smaller than the one below, creating a pyramidal form that could be seen from great distances across the flat Mesopotamian plain. The construction process for these early ziggurats involved sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, drainage systems, and material properties that enabled builders to create stable foundations in the soft alluvial soil of southern Mesopotamia. Architects developed techniques for preventing water damage through elaborate drainage systems that channeled rainwater away from the structure while maintaining structural integrity. The use of fired bricks for exterior facing provided weather protection, while sun-dried brick cores reduced construction costs and structural weight. The religious significance of ziggurats extended beyond their function as temple platforms to encompass complex theological concepts about the relationship between heaven and earth. These structures were understood to provide meeting places where gods could descend to communicate with human worshippers, while their elevated positions symbolically brought human prayers closer to divine realms. The architectural form of the ziggurat, with its ascending levels and summit temple, created a physical representation of the cosmic mountain that featured prominently in Mesopotamian religious thought. The establishment of patron deities for individual city-states during this period created a religious framework that reinforced political independence while maintaining cultural unity across the region. Each major city identified itself with a particular god or goddess who was understood to own the city's territory and protect its inhabitants. This theological arrangement provided religious justification for political autonomy, while creating networks of divine relationships that paralleled human diplomatic and economic connections. The patron deity of the moon god Nana, was understood to control the city's agricultural fertility and commercial prosperity through his influence over tides, seasonal cycles, and navigation. Religious texts from this period describe elaborate festivals honouring Nana that involved the entire urban population in ceremonial activities designed to ensure divine favour. These festivals included processions, ritual offerings, and dramatic performances that reinforced social cohesion while demonstrating the city's devotion to its patron deity. Uruk's patron goddess Inanna represented love, fertility, and warfare, reflecting the city's roles in both agricultural production and military conflict. The religious traditions associated with Inanna included some of the earliest known literary compositions, including hymns and mythological narratives that explored themes of divine power, human mortality, and cosmic order. These literary works were preserved in cuneiform texts that were copied and studied throughout Mesopotamia, contributing to the development of a shared cultural heritage that transcended local political boundaries. The codification of Sumerian religious practices during this period involved the standardization of ritual procedures, theological concepts, and ceremonial calendars that created consistency across different city-states while accommodating local variations. This process required extensive coordination among priestly establishments and contributed to the development of religious literature that preserved traditional knowledge in written form. The creation of standard liturgical texts enabled the training of priests who could perform ceremonies according to established protocols, while maintaining the flexibility necessary for local adaptation. The religious and political foundations established during the early dynastic I period created the framework for an era of unprecedented military innovation and territorial expansion that would fundamentally transform the nature of Mesopotamian civilization. As city-states consolidated their internal governance structures and accumulated wealth through agricultural intensification and craft production, competition for resources and territorial control intensified dramatically. The period from 2750 to 2334 BC witnessed the emergence of professional military forces, revolutionary weapons technology, and strategic innovations that established patterns of warfare that would influence military development throughout the ancient world. The transformation of Mesopotamian warfare during this period began with fundamental changes in military organization that reflected broader social and economic developments within city-states. The citizen militias and temple guards that had provided adequate defense during earlier periods proved insufficient for the complex military challenges of the early dynastic 2-3 period. Professional armies emerged as rulers recognized that successful warfare required specialized training, standardized equipment, and coordinated tactical formations that could only be achieved through dedicated military institutions. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals the construction of specialized military installations, including barracks, training grounds, and weapons workshops that demonstrate the institutionalization of warfare during this period. Excavations at Mari have uncovered extensive military quarters capable of housing hundreds of soldiers, with standardized room layouts and communal facilities that reflect organized military life. These installations included armories containing thousands of bronze weapons, indicating the scale of military preparation that characterized major city-states. The development of bronze metallurgy revolutionized weapons production and created significant advantages for city-states that could access copper and tin resources. Bronze weapons offered superior durability and sharpness compared to earlier copper tools, while bronze armor provided effective protection against both bronze and stone weapons. Archaeological excavations have revealed sophisticated bronze working facilities at sites including Ur and Lagash, with specialized furnaces capable of producing large quantities of standardized military equipment. The standardization of bronze weapons during this period reflects centralized military procurement systems that ensured uniformity in equipment and training. Spearheads discovered at multiple sites show remarkably consistent dimensions and manufacturing techniques, suggesting that weapon production followed established specifications enforced by military authorities. Bronze axe heads, daggers, and arrowheads similarly demonstrate standardized designs that facilitated mass production while maintaining quality standards necessary for effective combat performance. The emergence of organised infantry formations represented perhaps the most significant tactical innovation of this period, transforming warfare from individual combat between champions to coordinated battles involving hundreds or thousands of soldiers. The famous standard of dating to approximately 2600 BC, provides detailed visual evidence of these early infantry formations, depicting soldiers arranged in tight ranks carrying identical spears and shields. The uniformity of equipment and positioning shown in this artwork reflects sophisticated understanding of tactical coordination and military discipline. These infantry formations typically consisted of soldiers carrying long spears, rectangular shields, and bronze helmets arranged in multiple ranks that could advance together while maintaining defensive cohesion. The front rank held their spears forward to engage enemy forces, while rear ranks could provide support and replace casualties without disrupting the formation's integrity. This tactical system required extensive training to coordinate movement and maintain formation discipline during the chaos of battle. The development of protective equipment accompanied advances in offensive weaponry, with bronze helmets, leather armour, and wooden shields providing soldiers with unprecedented protection against enemy attacks. Archaeological discoveries at the Royal Cemetery of Ur include elaborately decorated helmets that demonstrate both the protective function and ceremonial significance of military equipment. These helmets were hammered from single pieces of bronze and featured decorative elements that identified the wearer's rank and unit affiliation. Shield technology advanced significantly during this period, with craftsmen developing techniques for creating large rectangular shields from wood frames covered with leather and reinforced with bronze fittings. These shields provided protection for the entire torso, while remaining light enough for infantry soldiers to carry during extended campaigns. The standardized dimensions of shields found at multiple archaeological sites suggest coordinated production systems that equipped entire military units with identical protective equipment. The invention of the wheeled vehicle during the early dynastic period created new possibilities for both transportation and warfare that would influence military development throughout the ancient world. The earliest wheeled vehicles in Mesopotamia were heavy four-wheeled carts drawn by oxen or onagers, designed primarily for transporting goods and materials over long distances. Archaeological evidence from sites including Kish and Susa includes both actual wheel remains and artistic depictions that document the rapid adoption of this revolutionary technology. Early military applications of wheeled vehicles focused on logistics and transportation rather than direct combat roles. These heavy carts could carry supplies, weapons, and equipment that enabled armies to campaign far from their home territories while maintaining adequate provisioning. The ability to transport large quantities of food, water, and military equipment extended the operational range of city-state armies and facilitated the conquest of distant territories that had previously been beyond effective military reach. The development of lighter, faster-wheeled vehicles led to the creation of the first war chariots, though these early vehicles differed significantly from the horse-drawn chariots that would dominate later periods. Early dynastic war chariots were typically drawn by onagers or mules and carried 2 or 3 crew members, including a driver, and 1 or 2 warriors armed with spears or bows. These vehicles served primarily as mobile command platforms and rapid transportation for elite warriors, rather than as shock weapons designed to break enemy formations. Archaeological evidence for early chariot warfare includes artistic depictions on the standard of Ur and other contemporary artifacts that show these vehicles in military contexts. The chariots depicted in these sources feature solid wheels, high-sided bodies for crew protection, and harness systems designed for equid animals. The tactical role of these early chariots appears to have involved reconnaissance, pursuit of fleeing enemies, and transportation of commanders who could observe battlefield conditions and direct troop movements. The reign of Netum of Lagash around 2450 BC exemplifies the military innovations and territorial ambitions that characterised the early dynastic III period. Netum's military campaigns, documented through both archaeological evidence and cuneiform inscriptions, demonstrates sophisticated strategic planning and tactical execution that enabled Lagash to establish hegemony over much of southern Mesopotamia. His conflicts with the neighbouring city-state of Umar provide detailed insights into the nature of intercity warfare during this period. The territorial dispute between Lagash and Umar originated in competing claims over agricultural land in the fertile region between the two cities. Both city-states had invested heavily in irrigation infrastructure that extended their cultivated territories, creating overlapping claims that could only be resolved through negotiation or warfare. Archaeological surveys of the disputed region reveal extensive canal systems constructed by both cities, along with fortified settlements designed to control access to water resources and agricultural land. Enetum's military campaigns against Umar involved coordinated operations that combined infantry assaults, siege warfare, and diplomatic pressure to achieve decisive victory. Cuneiform inscriptions describe his army's composition, including professional infantry units, chariot forces, and auxiliary troops drawn from allied city-states. The scale of these military operations required sophisticated logistical planning to coordinate the movement and supply of thousands of soldiers across distances of hundreds of kilometres. The Stele of the Vultures, erected by Enetum to commemorate his victory over Umar, represents one of the earliest known examples of military propaganda and provides unprecedented detail about early dynastic warfare. This massive limestone monument, measuring over 1.8 metres in height, features elaborate carved reliefs depicting both divine and human aspects of Enetum's military success. The artistic program of the stele demonstrates sophisticated understanding of visual narrative and political messaging designed to legitimize Enetum's conquests while intimidating potential enemies. The divine side of the stele of the vultures shows Lagash's patron deity Ningirsu, holding a net containing captured enemies, emphasizing the religious justification for Enetum's military campaigns. This imagery reinforces the theological framework that understood warfare as divine judgment executed through human agents. The god's massive scale compared to the human figures emphasizes divine power while positioning Enetum as the deity's chosen instrument for punishing Umar's transgressions. The human side of the stele provides detailed documentation of early dynastic military equipment and tactical formations that supplements archaeological evidence from weapons and armour discoveries. The carved reliefs show infantry soldiers arranged in tight phalanx formations, carrying long spears and large rectangular shields that protect their entire bodies. The uniformity of equipment and positioning demonstrates the disciplined military organisation that enabled Lagash to achieve decisive victory over its enemies. The artistic technique employed on the stele of the vultures reveals sophisticated understanding of visual composition and narrative structure that influenced Mesopotamian art for centuries. The relief carvings use overlapping figures to suggest depth and movement, while hierarchical scaling emphasises the relative importance of different participants. The integration of cuneiform inscriptions with visual imagery creates a comprehensive historical record that serves both documentary and propagandistic functions. The military innovations documented on the stele of the vultures include the use of siege equipment for attacking fortified positions, demonstrating that early dynastic warfare had evolved beyond simple field battles to encompass complex operations against defended settlements. The relief carvings show soldiers using scaling ladders, battering rams and protective shelters during siege operations, indicating sophisticated understanding of siege warfare techniques that would be further developed during later periods. The territorial expansion achieved by Enetum extended Lagash's control far beyond its original city-state boundaries to encompass much of southern Mesopotamia and portions of neighbouring regions. Cuneiform inscriptions document his conquests of cities including Ur, Uruk, Kish, and Akshak, creating a territorial empire that prefigured later Mesopotamian imperial formations. The administration of these conquered territories required new governmental institutions and administrative techniques that influenced political development throughout the region. The diplomatic consequences of Akhenaten's military success included the establishment of tribute relationships with defeated city-states and the negotiation of territorial boundaries that remained stable for several generations. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout southern Mesopotamia reveals the construction of administrative buildings and the installation of Lagash officials in conquered territories, demonstrating systematic approaches to imperial governance that maintained control over distant populations. The military pressures created by Akhenaten's expansion stimulated defensive innovations among other city-states, including the construction of more sophisticated fortification systems and the development of military alliances designed to counter Lagash's growing power. Archaeological excavations at sites including Mari and Ebla reveal massive defensive walls and military installations constructed during this period in response to the changing strategic environment created by territorial expansion. The emergence of formal diplomatic practices during the early Dynastic III period reflected the need for systematic approaches to managing relationships between increasingly powerful and militarily capable city-states. The complexity of territorial disputes, tribute arrangements, and military alliances required sophisticated negotiation procedures and record-keeping systems that preserved agreements and facilitated enforcement. Archaeological discoveries of diplomatic archives provide insights into these early international relations and their influence on political development. The earliest known peace treaties from this period document elaborate procedures for establishing boundaries, regulating trade relationships, and managing disputes between city-states. These agreements typically involved religious oaths sworn before patron deities, creating divine guarantees for treaty compliance that supplemented human enforcement mechanisms. The standardization of treaty language and procedures across multiple agreements suggests the development of diplomatic conventions that facilitated international communication and negotiation. The famous boundary agreement between Lagash and Umma, negotiated after Akhenaten's military victory, exemplifies these early diplomatic practices and their integration with religious and legal traditions. This treaty established precise territorial boundaries marked by stone monuments and irrigation channels, while creating procedures for managing shared water resources and resolving future disputes. The religious framework of the agreement invoked divine punishment for treaty violations, creating supernatural enforcement mechanisms that supplemented human monitoring and enforcement. The development of standardized diplomatic language during this period facilitated communication between city-states that spoke different languages or dialects, contributing to the emergence of Akkadian as a lingua franca for international relations. Diplomatic archives from multiple sites reveal the use of similar formulaic expressions and legal concepts across different linguistic communities, suggesting coordinated development of international legal traditions that transcended local political boundaries. The military innovations and territorial expansions of the early Dynastic III period created unprecedented wealth and cultural exchange that fostered remarkable achievements in literature, artistic expression, and technological development. The concentration of resources in major city-states, combined with the need to document complex administrative and diplomatic relationships, provided both the means and motivation for cultural innovations that would influence human civilization for millennia. Professional scribes, supported by temple and palace institutions, began experimenting with cuneiform writing beyond its original administrative functions, creating humanity's first known literary compositions that explored themes of heroism, divine intervention, and human mortality. The earliest literary works emerged from the practical needs of religious institutions and royal courts, but quickly evolved into sophisticated narrative compositions that demonstrated remarkable artistic sophistication. Temple scribes initially composed hymns and prayers for specific religious ceremonies, but these functional texts gradually incorporated complex mythological narratives and poetic techniques that transformed simple liturgical formulas into elaborate literary works. The famous Kesh Temple hymn, composed around 2600 BC, exemplifies this evolution from functional religious text to sophisticated literary composition, featuring elaborate metaphorical language and complex narrative structure that demonstrates advanced understanding of poetic technique. Religious literature during this period encompassed creation myths, divine genealogies, and theological treatises that preserved and systematized Sumerian religious knowledge. The composition known as the Eridu Genesis, though surviving only in later copies, originated during the early dynastic period and represents humanity's first known flood narrative. This text describes the creation of humanity by the gods, the establishment of the first cities, and a great flood that destroys most of human civilization, themes that would reappear in later Mesopotamian literature and influence religious traditions throughout the ancient world. The development of heroic literature during this period produced some of humanity's most enduring literary achievements, including early versions of stories that would eventually culminate in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Archaeological discoveries at multiple sites have revealed fragments of Sumerian compositions describing the adventures of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, and his companion Enkidu, demonstrating that these narratives were already well established during the early dynastic period. These early Gilgamesh stories focused on individual episodes rather than forming a unified epic, including tales of Gilgamesh's conflict with the monster Humbaba and his journey to the cedar forest. The literary techniques employed in these early heroic narratives reveal sophisticated understanding of dramatic structure, character development, and thematic unity that rivals the achievements of any ancient literature. Scribes developed complex poetic meters and parallelistic structures that enhanced the oral performance of these texts, while creating memorable patterns that aided memorization and transmission. The use of epithets, repeated phrases, and formulaic expressions created a distinctive literary style that influenced Mesopotamian poetry for centuries, while facilitating the training of performers who could recite these lengthy compositions from memory. The preservation of literary texts required systematic copying and archival procedures that created the world's first libraries and literary traditions. Temple complexes at major cities maintained extensive collections of literary tablets that were regularly copied by student scribes as part of their educational training. Archaeological excavations at Nippur have revealed thousands of literary tablets spanning several centuries, demonstrating continuous traditions of textual preservation and transmission that maintained literary works across multiple generations. The standardization of literary language during this period involved the development of a classical form of Sumerian that differed significantly from contemporary spoken dialects, creating a prestigious literary register that enhanced the authority and permanence of written compositions. This literary Sumerian incorporated archaic vocabulary, complex grammatical structures, and specialized terminology that required extensive education to master, contributing to the professional specialization of scribal classes and the development of literary canons that defined cultural sophistication. Artistic achievements during the early dynastic period encompassed revolutionary innovations in sculpture, relief carving, and decorative arts that established aesthetic principles and technical standards that would influence Mesopotamian art for millennia. The development of sophisticated stone carving techniques enabled artists to create monumental sculptures and architectural decorations that demonstrated unprecedented technical skill and artistic vision. The famous votive statues from the square temple at Eshnunna, dating to around 2700 BC, exemplify the distinctive Sumerian sculptural style, with their enlarged eyes, clasped hands, and geometric treatment of facial features and clothing. These votive statues served religious functions as permanent representatives of worshippers in temple complexes, but their artistic achievement extends far beyond mere functionality to encompass sophisticated understanding of proportion, expression, and symbolic meaning. The sculptors who create these works developed standardized conventions for representing human figures that emphasize spiritual rather than naturalistic qualities, using enlarged eyes to suggest divine awareness and geometric patterns to indicate the eternal nature of religious devotion. The variety of facial types and clothing styles represented in these statues demonstrates individual artistic expression within established conventional frameworks. The technical challenges involved in creating these stone sculptures required mastery of specialized tools and techniques that represented significant advances over earlier artistic traditions. Sumerian sculptors developed bronze chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive materials that enabled them to work with extremely hard stones, including diorite and basalt imported from distant regions. The precision achieved in carving fine details such as beard patterns, textile designs, and jewellery demonstrates sophisticated understanding of stone properties and carving techniques that required years of specialised training to master. Relief carving reached new heights of artistic achievement during this period, with major monuments such as the Stele of the Vultures demonstrating complex narrative programs and sophisticated compositional techniques. The artists who created these relief carvings developed methods for representing three-dimensional space on flat surfaces, using overlapping figures, hierarchical scaling, and architectural settings to create convincing illusions of depth and movement. The integration of cuneiform inscriptions with visual imagery required careful coordination between scribes and artists that produced unified artistic programs combining textual and visual communication. The development of cylinder seal carving during the early dynastic period created a distinctive art form that combined practical administrative functions with sophisticated artistic expression. These small cylindrical stones, typically measuring between 2 and 4 centimeters in length, were carved with intricate designs that could be rolled across clay tablets to create distinctive impressions identifying their owners. The miniature scale of cylinder seals required extraordinary technical skill and artistic precision, with master carvers creating complex narrative scenes, decorative patterns, and symbolic compositions within spaces measuring only a few square centimeters. Cylinder seal designs during this period encompassed mythological narratives, religious ceremonies, and secular activities that provide unprecedented insights into Sumerian cultural values and daily life. Seals depicting banquet scenes show elaborate feasting activities with multiple participants consuming food and drink, while musicians provide entertainment, revealing social customs and ceremonial practices that supplemented textual sources. Combat scenes featuring heroes battling monsters or wild animals demonstrate mythological themes, while showcasing artistic techniques for representing dynamic action and dramatic tension. The artistic style that emerged in cylinder seal carving influenced other forms of Sumerian art through its emphasis on linear clarity, symbolic compression, and narrative efficiency. The technical constraints of working in such small scales forced artists to develop economical methods for representing complex ideas and emotions, creating artistic conventions that were adopted in larger scale works, including wall reliefs and architectural decoration. The widespread use of cylinder seals throughout Mesopotamian society also democratized access to sophisticated artistic imagery, enabling individuals of modest means to own finely carved artistic objects. Technological innovations during the early dynastic period encompassed revolutionary advances in transportation, agriculture, and manufacturing that transformed the material foundations of Mesopotamian civilization. The development of wheeled vehicles represented perhaps the most significant technological breakthrough, with archaeological evidence documenting the rapid adoption of four-wheeled carts and two-wheeled chariots that revolutionized both civilian transportation and military operations. Excavations at Kish have revealed actual wheel remains dating to around 2700 BC, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of mechanical principles and woodworking techniques required for wheel construction. The earliest Mesopotamian wheels were constructed from 3 wooden planks held together with wooden or metal braces, creating solid wheels that were extremely durable but relatively heavy compared to later spoke designs. The construction process required precise measurement and cutting to ensure circular symmetry. while the attachment systems that connected wheels to axles demanded sophisticated understanding of mechanical stress and rotational dynamics. Archaeological analysis of wheel remains reveals the use of hardwood species selected for their strength and durability, indicating systematic knowledge of material properties and their applications. The development of improved axle systems accompanied advances in wheel construction, with craftsmen creating rotating axle assemblies that reduced friction and enabled vehicles to carry heavier loads over longer distances. Bronze fittings were developed to reinforce critical stress points and provide smooth bearing surfaces that extended vehicle lifespan while improving performance. The standardization of axle dimensions and wheel diameters across multiple archaeological sites suggests coordinated technological development and possibly centralized manufacturing systems that supplied vehicles to multiple communities. Sailboat technology advanced dramatically during this period, with innovations in hull design, rigging systems, and navigation techniques that enabled Mesopotamian merchants to conduct trade across vast distances, including maritime routes in the Persian Gulf and overland connections reaching the Indus Valley and Anatolia. Archaeological discoveries at include model boats that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamic principles and sail configuration, featuring deep keels for stability and efficient sail plans that maximized wind power while maintaining maneuverability. The construction techniques employed in early dynastic boat building involved sophisticated joinery methods and waterproofing systems that created vessels capable of carrying substantial cargoes across open water. Shipwrights developed techniques for shaping wooden planks using steam bending and precise cutting that created hull forms optimized for specific functions, including river navigation, coastal trading, and deep-water voyages. The use of bitumen for waterproofing and bronze fittings for reinforcement demonstrated integration of multiple technologies in creating complex transportation systems. Navigation techniques developed during this period included the use of celestial observation, landmark recognition, and systematic knowledge of wind patterns and seasonal weather conditions that enabled mariners to conduct reliable voyages across hundreds of kilometers of open water. Archaeological evidence suggests that Mesopotamian navigators maintained detailed knowledge of coastal features, water depths, and harbour facilities that was transmitted through professional training and preserved in written sailing directions. The development of standardized measurement systems for distances and directions facilitated navigation while enabling the creation of early maps and geographical records. Agricultural technology during the early dynastic period encompassed revolutionary improvements in ploughing techniques, irrigation systems, and crop processing that dramatically increased agricultural productivity and enabled the support of larger urban populations. The development of the wheeled plough represented a crucial innovation that reduced the labour required for field preparation while improving soil cultivation quality. Archaeological discoveries include bronze ploughshares and wooden plough components that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of soil dynamics and the mechanical principles required for efficient cultivation. The wheeled plough system typically consisted of a wooden beam supporting a bronze ploughshare, with wheels that controlled ploughing depth and reduced the physical effort required from draft animals. This design enabled farmers to cultivate larger areas more efficiently while achieving more consistent furrow depths that improved seed placement and crop yields. The standardization of plough components across multiple sites suggests organized production and distribution systems that made improved agricultural technology available to farming communities throughout the region. Irrigation technology advanced significantly during this period, with the development of sophisticated water management systems that included primary distribution canals, secondary delivery channels, and drainage systems that prevented waterlogging and soil salinization. Archaeological surveys have documented extensive canal networks that demonstrate advanced engineering capabilities, including gradient calculation, flow control, and maintenance procedures that sustained agricultural productivity over centuries. The construction of these systems required coordinated labour involving thousands of workers and sophisticated organisational capabilities that integrated technical knowledge with administrative management. Mathematical achievements during the early dynastic period included the development of the sexagesimal number system that remains in use today for measuring time and angles. This base 60 system emerged from practical needs for astronomical observation and geometric calculation, but its mathematical properties proved superior to decimal systems for many applications, including fraction calculation and geometric measurement. Cuneiform tablets from this period document sophisticated mathematical procedures, including area calculation, volume measurement, and proportional relationships that demonstrate advanced understanding of mathematical principles. The sexagesimal system's advantages included its large number of factors, which made fraction calculations more manageable than in base 10 systems, and its compatibility with astronomical observations based on the approximate 360-day year. Mesopotamian mathematicians developed standardized procedures for multiplication, division, and square root calculation using sexagesimal notation, creating mathematical tables and reference works that were copied and used for centuries. The integration of mathematical knowledge with practical applications in architecture, engineering, and commerce demonstrated the sophisticated intellectual achievements of Sumerian civilization. The astronomical observations and mathematical innovations that had flourished in Sumerian temple complexes during the early dynastic period continued to develop even as the political landscape of Mesopotamia underwent its most dramatic transformation since the emergence of urban civilization itself. Around 2334 BC, a Semitic-speaking people from the northern regions of Mesopotamia began a series of military campaigns that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the ancient Near East and mark the end of independent Sumerian city-states. This transformation was not merely a change of rulers, but represented the world's first successful attempt to create a multi-ethnic empire that would endure for nearly 2 centuries. The origins of Akkadian power lay in the gradual demographic and cultural changes that had been occurring in northern Mesopotamia throughout the early dynastic period. Semitic-speaking populations, who had been present in the region since at least 2800 BC, had initially coexisted with Sumerian communities as traders, craftsmen, and agricultural workers. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Meroe and Tel Beidar reveals increasing Semitic influence in material culture, religious practices, and administrative systems during the centuries preceding the Akkadian conquest. These populations had gradually adopted Sumerian urban organization, cuneiform writing, and religious traditions, while maintaining their distinct linguistic and cultural identity. The political fragmentation that characterized the late early dynastic period created opportunities for ambitious leaders to exploit the weaknesses of the traditional city-state system. Constant warfare between Sumerian cities had exhausted their military resources and disrupted the agricultural production that sustained urban populations. Archaeological excavations at multiple sites reveal evidence of destruction layers dating to this period, indicating widespread conflict that weakened the defensive capabilities of individual city-states. The tribute relationships and territorial disputes that had dominated intercity politics created resentments and instabilities that could be exploited by external powers. Sargon of Akkad emerged from this chaotic environment as one of history's most successful military commanders and political innovators. According to later Mesopotamian traditions, Sargon began his career as a cupbearer to Ur-Zababa, king of Kish, before establishing his own power base and founding the city of Akkad. The location of Akkad itself remains archaeologically elusive, though textual evidence suggests it was situated in the northern alluvium, where it could control both riverine transportation and overland trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with Syria and Anatolia. Sargon's military innovations built upon the tactical and technological developments of the early dynastic period, while introducing new strategic concepts that proved devastatingly effective against traditional Sumerian warfare. His armies combined the disciplined infantry formations that had characterized earlier Mesopotamian warfare with more flexible tactical units that could adapt to different battlefield conditions and enemy formations. Archaeological evidence from sites associated with early Akkadian military activity reveals standardized bronze weapons and protective equipment that demonstrate centralized production and distribution systems capable of equipping large professional armies. The composite bow emerged as a crucial technological advantage for Akkadian forces, providing superior range and penetrating power compared to the simple bows used by Sumerian armies. These weapons consisted of laminated wood, horn, and sinew components that created powerful and accurate projectile weapons capable of penetrating bronze armour at considerable distances. The manufacture of composite bows required specialised craftsmanship and access to diverse raw materials, suggesting sophisticated supply networks that connected Akkadian territories with the distant resource regions. Sargon's first major military campaign targeted the southern Sumerian cities that had dominated Mesopotamian politics for centuries. His conquest of Uruk around 2334 BC demonstrated tactical innovations that overcame the massive fortifications and professional armies that had protected major city-states during the early dynastic period. Cuneiform sources describe siege techniques that combined direct assault with systematic disruption of agricultural and water supplies, forcing defended cities to surrender rather than endure prolonged blockades. The fall of Uruk sent shockwaves throughout the Sumerian world and demonstrated that the traditional military advantages of established city-states could be overcome by innovative tactics and superior organisation. Archaeological evidence from Uruk's destruction levels reveals extensive burning and deliberate demolition of major buildings, indicating systematic conquest rather than mere raiding or tribute collection. However, the subsequent rebuilding activities suggest that Sargon pursued policies of reconstruction and integration rather than simple exploitation of conquered territories. Sargon's conquest of Ur proved equally decisive and demonstrated his ability to adapt military tactics to different geographical and defensive conditions. Ur's position near the Persian Gulf and its extensive maritime trade connections required different strategic approaches than the riverine cities of central Mesopotamia. Archaeological excavations reveal that Akkadian forces successfully breached Ur's massive defensive walls and captured the city's temple complexes, but the subsequent occupation levels show continuity in religious practices and administrative systems that indicate policies of cultural accommodation rather than wholesale replacement. The subjugation of Lagash represented perhaps Sargon's most significant military achievement, given that city's long tradition of military success and territorial expansion during the early dynastic period. Lagash's extensive irrigation systems and agricultural territories had made it one of the wealthiest and most powerful Sumerian states, while its military traditions and professional armies posed formidable challenges to Akkadian expansion. Archaeological evidence from Girsu and other Lagash territories reveals destruction levels followed by new construction using Akkadian architectural techniques and administrative layouts. Nippur's incorporation into the Akkadian Empire required particularly careful handling due to the city's unique religious significance throughout the Sumerian world. As the centre of Enlil worship and the traditional mediator in intercity disputes, Nippur's allegiance was crucial for legitimising Akkadian rule over Sumerian populations. Sargon's approach to Nippur demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Mesopotamian religious and political traditions, with policies that preserved the city's sacred status while integrating its priestly hierarchies into Akkadian administrative systems. The creation of the Akkadian Empire required administrative innovations that could manage diverse populations across vast territories while maintaining effective central control. Sargon developed a governmental system that combined Akkadian military authority with traditional Sumerian administrative practices, creating hybrid institutions that proved remarkably effective for imperial management. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals the establishment of Akkadian governors and administrative centres that maintained local autonomy while ensuring imperial compliance and tribute collection. The integration of Sumerian city-states into the Akkadian Empire involved complex negotiations between imperial authorities and local elites that preserved many traditional privileges while establishing new frameworks for political authority. Sumerian temple complexes continue to function as religious and economic centres, but their activities were coordinated with imperial policies through appointed officials who served as intermediaries between local traditions and imperial requirements. Cuneiform archives from this period document elaborate procedures for managing these relationships and resolving conflicts between competing authorities. Akkadian adoption of Sumerian religious practices represented one of the most significant cultural developments of this period, demonstrating the conqueror's recognition that effective imperial rule required accommodation of local traditions rather than their suppression. Sargon and his successors actively participated in traditional Sumerian religious ceremonies and contributed to the maintenance and expansion of major temple complexes throughout their territories. Archaeological excavations reveal continued construction and renovation of Sumerian temples under Akkadian rule, often incorporating architectural elements that combined traditional Sumerian forms with Akkadian innovations. The theological implications of Akkadian religious adoption involved complex negotiations between Sumerian and Akkadian divine pantheons that created syncretic religious systems accommodating both traditions. Akkadian rulers claimed divine authorization from traditional Sumerian gods while introducing their own deities into local religious practices. This process required sophisticated theological reasoning and priestly cooperation that preserved essential Sumerian religious concepts while adapting them to imperial political requirements. Cuneiform writing underwent significant development during the early Akkadian period, as scribes adapted the system to accommodate Semitic grammatical structures and vocabulary, while preserving its utility for recording Sumerian texts. This adaptation process involved creating new sign values and grammatical conventions that enabled cuneiform to function effectively for both languages simultaneously. Archaeological discoveries of bilingual texts and scribal exercises demonstrate the complexity of this linguistic adaptation and the educational systems required to train scribes in both Sumerian and Akkadian literacy. The administrative applications of bilingual cuneiform enabled the Akkadian Empire to maintain effective communication across linguistically diverse territories while preserving local administrative traditions. Official documents were often produced in both Sumerian and Akkadian versions to ensure comprehension by different administrative personnel, while legal and commercial texts incorporated terminology from both languages to accommodate diverse populations. This linguistic flexibility contributed significantly to the empire's administrative efficiency and cultural integration. Akkadian military organisation incorporated Sumerian tactical innovations while introducing new strategic concepts that proved essential for managing a territorial empire spanning hundreds of kilometres. The traditional city-state armies that had dominated early dynastic warfare were inadequate for the challenges of imperial defence, which required rapid deployment of forces across vast distances and coordination of military activities in multiple theatres simultaneously. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of military installations and supply depots that demonstrate systematic approaches to imperial defence and logistics. The standardization of military equipment and training procedures across Akkadian territories created unprecedented uniformity in imperial forces, while accommodating regional variations in fighting techniques and equipment preferences. Bronze weapons and protective equipment followed standardized designs that facilitated mass production and replacement, while training procedures created consistent tactical capabilities across different ethnic and cultural groups within the imperial army. This military standardization proved crucial for maintaining imperial unity and effectiveness over extended periods. Trade relationships expanded dramatically under Akkadian rule as imperial authority created security and standardization that facilitated commercial activities across vast territories. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout the ancient Near East reveals Akkadian influence in material culture, artistic styles, and commercial practices that demonstrate the empire's role in promoting economic integration and cultural exchange. Mesopotamian products, including textiles, metalwork, and luxury goods, reached markets from the Indus Valley to Anatolia, while raw materials and exotic products flowed into Akkadian territories from distant regions. The economic foundations of the Akkadian Empire rested on sophisticated taxation and tribute systems that extracted resources from conquered territories while maintaining incentives for continued productivity and cooperation. Agricultural surpluses from the fertile Mesopotamian alluvium supported large urban populations and professional military forces, while tribute from conquered regions provided luxury goods and raw materials that enhanced imperial prestige and capabilities. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of large storage facilities and administrative complexes designed to manage these economic flows and ensure efficient resource distribution. Cultural exchange under Akkadian rule created unprecedented opportunities for artistic and intellectual development, as traditions from different regions combined to produce new forms of expression and knowledge. Sumerian literary traditions continued to develop under Akkadian patronage, with new compositions that incorporated themes and perspectives reflecting the imperial experience. Archaeological discoveries reveal artistic works that combine Sumerian iconographic traditions with Akkadian stylistic innovations, creating hybrid forms that influenced artistic development throughout the ancient Near East. The gradual shift from Sumerian to Akkadian as the dominant language of administration and commerce represented one of the most significant cultural transformations of this period, though the process occurred over several generations rather than through sudden replacement. Akkadian's advantages as a spoken language for interethnic communication, combined with its adoption by imperial administrative systems, created practical incentives for its use that gradually reduced Sumerian's role in daily affairs, while preserving its importance for religious and scholarly purposes. The linguistic adaptations and administrative innovations that had enabled the Akkadian Empire to function effectively across diverse populations ultimately proved insufficient to withstand the mounting pressures that accumulated during the late 22nd century BC. A combination of climate change, internal rebellions, and external invasions gradually weakened imperial control and created opportunities for local populations to reassert their independence. The Gutians, mountain peoples from the Zagros highlands, delivered the final blow to Akkadian power around 2154 BC, but their rule proved ephemeral and culturally destructive. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals destruction layers and abandonment levels that document the chaos and economic disruption that characterized this transitional period. From this political fragmentation emerged one of the most remarkable revivals in ancient history, as the Sumerian city of Ur gradually consolidated power and established the third dynasty of Ur, known to historians as Ur III. This renaissance began modestly around 2112 BC under Ur-Nammu, who initially controlled only the immediate vicinity of Ur itself. Archaeological excavations in the earliest III levels reveal relatively modest construction projects and limited territorial control that contrasted sharply with the massive imperial ambitions that would characterize the dynasty's later phases. Ur-Nammu's early reign focused on consolidating control over southern Mesopotamia through a combination of military campaigns, diplomatic alliances, and administrative reforms that gradually expanded Ur's influence beyond its traditional city-state boundaries. His approach differed significantly from earlier Akkadian imperial strategies, emphasizing the restoration of traditional Sumerian institutions and religious practices rather than the imposition of foreign administrative systems. Cuneiform inscriptions from this period describe Ur-Nammu's activities in explicitly religious terms, presenting his conquests as divine missions to restore proper worship and social order throughout the Sumerian heartland. The military campaigns that established Ur III power demonstrates sophisticated strategic planning and tactical innovation that built upon both Sumerian and Akkadian military traditions, while adapting to the changed political landscape of post-imperial Mesopotamia. Ur-Nammu's armies combined traditional Sumerian infantry formations with mobile units capable of rapid deployment across the flat terrain of the southern alluvium. Archaeological evidence from sites captured during these early campaigns reveals systematic destruction of Gutian installations, followed by immediate reconstruction using traditional Sumerian architectural techniques and religious iconography. The siege of Lagash around 2110 BC exemplified Ur-Nammu's military capabilities and demonstrated the tactical sophistication that enabled Ur-3 forces to overcome established defensive positions. Lagash had maintained semi-independence during the Gutian period and possessed substantial fortifications that had been strengthened with captured Akkadian military technology. Archaeological excavations reveal evidence of systematic siege operations, including the construction of earthworks, the diversion of water supplies, and the use of siege engines that forced the city's surrender after several months of blockade. Ur-Nammu's treatment of conquered territories established precedents for imperial administration that would characterize Ur-3 governance throughout its existence. Rather than installing foreign governors or dismantling local institutions, he typically appointed loyal Sumerian officials who could maintain traditional administrative practices while ensuring compliance with imperial policies. Archaeological evidence from provincial administrative centres reveals the construction of standardised governmental buildings that combine traditional Sumerian architectural forms with new functional requirements for imperial communication and resource management. The restoration of traditional Sumerian religious practices under Ur-Nammu represented both genuine cultural revival and calculated political strategy designed to legitimize Ur-3 rule among populations that had chafed under foreign domination. Major temple complexes throughout southern Mesopotamia received substantial investments for reconstruction and expansion, with architectural programs that emphasize continuity with pre-Akkadian traditions while incorporating innovations that reflected imperial wealth and ambition. The Temple of Nana at Ur itself underwent massive reconstruction that created one of the largest and most impressive religious complexes in Mesopotamian history. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, begun under Ur-Nammu and completed during the reign of his son Shulgi, represents the architectural and engineering pinnacle of Ur-3 achievement. This massive step tower, measuring approximately 64 by 46 metres at its base and rising to a height of over 30 metres, required unprecedented coordination of labour and resources that demonstrated the dynasty's organisational capabilities and territorial control. Archaeological analysis of the ziggurat's construction reveals sophisticated engineering techniques, including the use of bitumen waterproofing, elaborate drainage systems, and precisely calculated weight distribution that enabled the structure to survive for millennia. The ziggurat's construction process involved the mobilization of thousands of workers from throughout the Ur-3 territories, creating logistical challenges that required systematic approaches to labor management, material procurement, and quality control. Cuneiform archives document the complex administrative procedures used to coordinate these activities, including detailed records of worker assignments, material deliveries, and construction schedules that reveal sophisticated project management capabilities. The standardization of brick sizes and construction techniques across different phases of the project demonstrates centralized planning and quality control that ensured structural integrity and architectural coherence. The architectural program of the Great Ziggurat incorporated symbolic elements that reinforced Ur-3 religious and political ideology, while creating functional spaces for the elaborate ceremonies that legitimized imperial authority. The structure's 3 ascending stages represented the cosmic levels that connected Earth with heaven, while the summit temple provided a sacred space where the moon, god Nana, could descend to communicate with his earthly representatives. Archaeological reconstruction of the ziggurat's original appearance suggests that it was faced with fired bricks and decorated with elaborate architectural ornaments that created a visually stunning monument visible from great distances across the Mesopotamian plain. The completion of the ziggurat under Shulgi marked the beginning of the most prosperous and culturally productive phase of Ur-3 history. Shulgi's reign, lasting from approximately 2094 to 2047 BC, witnessed territorial expansion that extended Ur-3 control far beyond traditional Sumerian boundaries to encompass much of Mesopotamia and portions of neighbouring regions. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout this expanded territory reveals systematic imperial administration and cultural policies that created unprecedented political unity while accommodating regional diversity and local traditions. Shulgi's administrative innovations built upon the foundations established by his father, while introducing new systems for managing the complex logistics of governing a territorial empire. The creation of provincial administrative centres connected by efficient communication networks enabled central authorities to maintain effective control over distant territories while allowing local officials sufficient autonomy to address regional needs and conditions. Archaeological excavations at sites including Pusrish-Degen and Drehem reveal specialised administrative complexes designed to manage specific aspects of imperial governance, including livestock management, textile production, and religious offerings. The development of a sophisticated messenger system under Shulgi created communication capabilities that enabled rapid coordination of administrative and military activities across vast distances. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of way stations and supply depots along major routes that provided rest and provisioning for official messengers travelling between provincial centres and the imperial capital. Cuneiform archives document the complex procedures used to manage this communication system, including standardized message formats, authentication methods, and scheduling protocols that ensured reliable information flow throughout the empire. The codification of legal principles during the Ur-3 period produced the Code of Ur-Nammu, traditionally attributed to the dynasty's founder but possibly completed under Shulgi's direction. This legal compilation represents one of humanity's earliest systematic attempts to establish uniform legal standards across diverse populations and territories. Archaeological discoveries of legal tablets from multiple sites reveal widespread knowledge and application of these legal principles, suggesting effective dissemination and enforcement mechanisms that created unprecedented legal consistency across the Ur-3 territories. The Code of Ur-Nammu addressed fundamental legal issues including property rights, commercial transactions, family relationships, and criminal penalties through detailed provisions that reflected sophisticated understanding of legal principles and social relationships. Unlike later legal codes that emphasized retributive justice, Ur-Nammu's laws typically prescribed monetary compensation for injuries and damages, creating legal frameworks that prioritize social harmony and economic restoration over punishment. Archaeological evidence reveals that these legal principles were actively applied in local courts throughout the empire, with standardized procedures for evidence evaluation, witness testimony, and penalty assessment. The legal innovations of the Ur-3 period extended beyond criminal and civil law to encompass commercial regulations that facilitated trade and economic development throughout the empire. Standardized weights and measures, uniform currency systems, and regulated market procedures created commercial environments that encouraged entrepreneurship while preventing fraud and exploitation. Archaeological discoveries of commercial archives reveal complex business relationships and trading partnerships that spanned vast distances and involve participants from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds. The administrative sophistication of the Ur-3 state reached unprecedented levels of detail and systematic organization that enabled effective management of complex economic and social relationships across vast territories. The archives from Pusrish-Degen alone contain over 100,000 cuneiform tablets documenting the management of livestock offerings to temples throughout the empire, revealing administrative procedures of extraordinary complexity and precision. These records track individual animals from their initial acquisition through their ultimate sacrifice, documenting transportation logistics, feeding schedules and ceremonial requirements with meticulous attention to detail. The textile industry under Earth III administration demonstrates the dynasty's ability to coordinate large-scale manufacturing operations that involve thousands of workers and complex supply chains extending across multiple provinces. Archaeological excavations at sites including and Girsu reveal extensive workshop complexes where skilled artisans produced high-quality textiles using raw materials procured from throughout the empire and beyond. Cuneiform archives document the sophisticated management systems used to coordinate these operations, including detailed records of worker assignments, material allocations, and production schedules that enabled administrators to monitor efficiency and ensure quality standards. The organisation of textile production involves specialised facilities for different stages of the manufacturing process, including fibre preparation workshops, spinning centres, weaving installations, and finishing facilities that created finished products of exceptional quality and consistency. Archaeological analysis reveals sophisticated understanding of textile technology, including the use of improved looms, specialised tools, and innovative dyeing techniques that produce textiles superior to those of neighbouring regions. The standardisation of production procedures and quality controls enabled Earth III textile workshops to supply both domestic markets and international trade networks with products that established Mesopotamian textiles as premium commodities throughout the ancient world. Agricultural administration under the Earth III state achieved levels of systematic organisation and productivity that supported unprecedented population densities while generating substantial surpluses for urban consumption and international trade. The management of irrigation systems required coordinated planning and maintenance activities that involved thousands of agricultural workers operating under centralised direction. Archaeological surveys have documented the extensive canal networks constructed and maintained during this period, including primary distribution channels and secondary delivery systems that brought irrigation water to hundreds of thousands of hectares of cultivated land. The bureaucratic systems used to manage agricultural production involved detailed record-keeping procedures that tracked crop yields, labour inputs, and resource allocation with extraordinary precision. Cuneiform archives contain thousands of tablets documenting field assignments, planting schedules, harvest results, and storage arrangements that enabled administrators to optimise agricultural productivity while ensuring adequate food supplies for urban populations. The sophistication of these administrative systems enabled Earth III authorities to implement long-term agricultural planning that maintained soil fertility and prevented the environmental degradation that had affected earlier intensive agricultural systems. The development of specialised agricultural estates during this period created large-scale production facilities that combined traditional farming techniques with innovative management approaches designed to maximise efficiency and profitability. Archaeological excavations at sites including Girsu reveal extensive agricultural installations including granaries, processing facilities, and administrative buildings that demonstrate systematic approaches to agricultural production and distribution. These estates typically specialised in particular crops or livestock products, creating regional specialisation that enhanced overall economic efficiency while generating products for both local consumption and long-distance trade. Religious administration under the III state involved unprecedented coordination of ceremonial activities and temple management across vast territories that contained hundreds of religious institutions with diverse traditions and practices. The standardization of religious calendars and ceremonial procedures created empire-wide festivals and observances that reinforced political unity while accommodating local religious traditions and preferences. Archaeological evidence reveals substantial investments in temple construction and renovation throughout III territories, with architectural programs that combine traditional Sumerian religious forms with imperial iconography and decorative elements. The management of religious offerings and temple economies required sophisticated administrative systems that coordinated the collection, transportation, and distribution of vast quantities of agricultural products, livestock, and manufactured goods dedicated to divine service. The archives from Drehem document the complex procedures used to manage livestock offerings, including the coordination of animal deliveries from throughout the empire, the scheduling of sacrificial ceremonies, and the distribution of meat and other products to temple personnel and religious participants. These administrative procedures created economic systems of enormous complexity that generated substantial revenues while maintaining the religious legitimacy essential for imperial authority. The cultural achievements of the Orthodox period encompass significant developments in literature, art, and scholarship that built upon earlier Sumerian traditions, while reflecting the imperial experience and cosmopolitan perspectives that characterize this Renaissance. Literary compositions from this period include sophisticated hymns, mythological narratives, and wisdom texts that demonstrate remarkable artistic achievement and intellectual sophistication. The famous hymns to Shulgi exemplify this literary renaissance, combining traditional Sumerian poetic techniques with new themes and perspectives that reflect the imperial context and the ruler's unprecedented achievements. Artistic production during the Earth III period achieved new levels of technical excellence and aesthetic sophistication that influenced artistic traditions throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Sculptural works, including royal statues and architectural decorations, demonstrate mastery of advanced carving techniques and sophisticated understanding of proportion and composition. Archaeological discoveries reveal workshop areas where skilled artisans produced luxury goods, including jewellery, decorative objects, and ceremonial weapons that combined traditional Sumerian artistic motifs with innovative designs reflecting imperial wealth and cultural diversity. The sophisticated administrative systems and cultural achievements that had characterized the Earth III Renaissance could not indefinitely withstand the mounting pressures that accumulated during the final decades of the 21st century BC. Climate records from this period indicate increasingly arid conditions that reduced agricultural productivity throughout Mesopotamia, while the empire's extensive bureaucratic apparatus created enormous financial burdens that strained imperial resources. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals declining construction activity and reduced investment in public works projects during the later years of Shulgi's reign and throughout the reigns of his successors, Amar-Sin and Shu-Sin. The Amorite migrations that began around 2100 BC initially appeared as manageable tribal movements along the western margins of Mesopotamian territory, but these populations gradually coalesced into more organised political entities that posed increasing threats to Earth III territorial control. Archaeological surveys in the Middle Euphrates region reveal the establishment of fortified settlements and the adoption of Mesopotamian agricultural techniques by Amorite groups who had previously practiced nomadic pastoralism. These communities developed hybrid economic systems that combined traditional livestock management with intensive agriculture, creating prosperous settlements that could support larger populations and more sophisticated military organizations. The Amorite adoption of Mesopotamian urban organization and military technology transformed these tribal groups into formidable political entities capable of challenging established city-states and imperial authorities. Excavations at sites including Mari and Turka reveal substantial construction projects and sophisticated administrative systems that demonstrate rapid Amorite adaptation to sedentary urban life. These communities maintained their traditional social structures and cultural practices while incorporating Mesopotamian innovations in agriculture, crafts, and military organization that enhanced their competitive capabilities. The construction of massive defensive walls around and other major cities during the reign of Shu-Sin reflects growing awareness of external threats and the inadequacy of traditional military responses to the changing strategic environment. Archaeological analysis of these fortifications reveals sophisticated engineering techniques and enormous labour investments that diverted resources from productive economic activities while providing only temporary security against increasingly mobile and tactically flexible enemies. The famous Wall of the West, constructed to defend against Amorite incursions, stretched for over 100 kilometres but proved ineffective against enemies who could simply bypass or infiltrate these static defences. The reign of Ibbi-Sin, the last ruler of the Urtha III dynasty, witnessed the gradual disintegration of imperial control as provincial governors declared independence and external enemies captured strategic territories. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout the former Urtha III Empire reveals the abandonment of imperial administrative centres and the destruction of major public buildings during this period of political collapse. The systematic nature of this destruction suggests coordinated military campaigns rather than random raiding, indicating that Urtha III enemies possess sophisticated strategic planning capabilities and substantial military resources. The siege and capture of Ur itself around 2004 BC mark the definitive end of Sumerian political independence and the beginning of a new era dominated by Amorite dynasties. Archaeological excavations in the destruction levels of Ur reveal extensive burning and deliberate demolition of major buildings, including the royal palace and administrative complexes. However, the temple precincts show less evidence of destruction, suggesting that the conquerors recognised the religious and cultural significance of these institutions and sought to preserve their legitimacy through continuity with established traditions. The Elamite role in Ur's final destruction demonstrates the complex international dimensions of late Urtha III politics and the empire's vulnerability to coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Cuneiform sources describe Elamite forces capturing Ibbi-Sin and transporting him to Elam as a prisoner, while Amorite groups occupied much of the former imperial territory. Archaeological evidence from Susa reveals Mesopotamian artifacts and architectural elements that were transported from Ur and other conquered cities, indicating systematic looting and the transfer of cultural treasures to Elamite territory. The immediate aftermath of Urtha III collapse witnessed the fragmentation of Mesopotamian political authority among numerous competing dynasties and city-states, many ruled by Amorite leaders who adopted Mesopotamian titles and administrative practices while maintaining their traditional cultural identities. Archaeological excavations at sites including Ibbi-Sin and Larsa reveal the establishment of new royal centres that combined Amorite architectural traditions with Mesopotamian governmental institutions. These hybrid political systems preserved essential elements of Mesopotamian administrative expertise while adapting to the changed demographic and cultural landscape of post-imperial Mesopotamia. The Ibbi-Sin dynasty, established by Ishbi-Era around 2017 BC, claimed legitimacy as the successor to Urtha III authority and maintained many traditional Sumerian governmental practices and religious observances. Archaeological evidence from Ibbi-Sin reveals substantial construction projects including temple renovations and administrative buildings that demonstrate the dynasty's commitment to preserving Mesopotamian cultural traditions. However, the territorial extent of Ibbi-Sin's actual control remained limited to the immediate vicinity of the city itself, indicating the fragmented nature of post-imperial political authority. The competing dynasty established at Larsa around the same period pursued similar legitimation strategies while controlling different portions of the former Urtha III territory. Archaeological excavations at Larsa reveal extensive construction activities and sophisticated administrative systems that maintained continuity with imperial precedents while adapting to reduced territorial scope and resources. The rivalry between Ibbi-Sin and Larsa created ongoing military conflicts that further weakened Mesopotamian political unity and created opportunities for external intervention. The gradual extinction of Sumerian as a spoken language during this period occurred through complex processes of demographic change and cultural assimilation, rather than sudden replacement or official prohibition. Archaeological evidence suggests that Sumerian continued to be spoken in rural areas and religious contexts well into the second millennium BC, while Akkadian increasingly dominated urban administration and commercial activities. The bilingual nature of many cuneiform texts from this period demonstrates the transitional character of this linguistic transformation and the efforts made to preserve Sumerian cultural knowledge. Educational institutions played crucial roles in preserving Sumerian linguistic and cultural traditions during this period of political fragmentation and demographic change. Archaeological discoveries at scribal schools reveal curricula that emphasize Sumerian literary texts, religious compositions, and legal traditions as essential components of advanced education. These institutions created a class of bilingual scholars who could function effectively in Akkadian-dominated administrative environments while maintaining expertise in traditional Sumerian knowledge systems. The development of Sumerian Akkadian lexical lists and grammatical texts during this period represents systematic scholarly efforts to preserve and transmit Sumerian linguistic knowledge to future generations. These reference works, discovered in large numbers at sites throughout Mesopotamia, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of comparative linguistics and pedagogical methodology. The standardization of these educational materials across different cities and dynasties suggests coordinated scholarly cooperation that transcended political boundaries and maintained intellectual continuity despite political fragmentation. Religious institutions emerged as the primary guardians of Sumerian cultural traditions during this period, maintaining temple libraries and scriptoriums that preserved vast collections of Sumerian literary and religious texts. Archaeological excavations at major temple complexes reveal extensive archives containing thousands of tablets with Sumerian compositions, including myths, hymns, prayers, and ritual instructions. These collections were actively maintained and expanded throughout the second millennium BC, demonstrating ongoing commitment to preserving Sumerian cultural heritage. The role of temples in preserving Sumerian traditions extended beyond simple archival functions, to encompass active scholarly activities including the composition of new works in classical Sumerian and the compilation of comprehensive literary collections. Archaeological evidence reveals specialized scriptoriums within temple complexes, where trained scribes produced copies of important texts and created new compositions that maintained traditional Sumerian literary styles and themes. These activities required substantial institutional resources and demonstrated the continued cultural prestige associated with Sumerian learning. The emergence of Babylon as a major political centre under Hammurabi around 1894 BC marked a crucial transition in Mesopotamian political development and the final consolidation of Amorite control over the region. Archaeological excavations at Babylon reveal massive construction projects and sophisticated urban planning that created one of the ancient world's most impressive cities. The establishment of Babylonian hegemony over much of Mesopotamia created political stability that enabled cultural and economic recovery, while fundamentally altering the region's ethnic and linguistic composition. Hammurabi's legal code, inscribed on a massive stone stele around 1750 BC, demonstrates both continuity with earlier Mesopotamian legal traditions and significant innovations that reflected Amorite cultural values and administrative practices. Archaeological analysis of the code's provisions reveals sophisticated understanding of legal principles and social relationships that built upon Sumerian and Akkadian precedents, while addressing new challenges created by demographic and cultural change. The widespread distribution of copies throughout Mesopotamian territory indicates systematic efforts to establish uniform legal standards across diverse populations. The preservation of Sumerian religious and literary texts within Babylonian cultural institutions demonstrates the continued prestige and practical utility of traditional Mesopotamian knowledge systems. Archaeological discoveries reveal that Babylonian scribal schools maintained comprehensive curricula that included Sumerian language instruction and the study of classical Sumerian literary works. These educational programs created generations of bilingual scholars who could access traditional knowledge while functioning effectively within Akkadian-dominated administrative and commercial environments. The development of new literary works that combined Sumerian themes with Akkadian linguistic expression represents creative cultural synthesis that preserved essential elements of Sumerian tradition while adapting to changed linguistic and cultural circumstances. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh, though composed primarily in Akkadian, drew extensively upon earlier Sumerian narrative traditions and incorporated themes and episodes that had originated during the Sumerian period. Archaeological discoveries of multiple versions of this epic demonstrate its widespread popularity and its role in transmitting Sumerian cultural values to later generations. The gradual transformation of Sumerian deities into elements of broader Mesopotamian religious systems illustrates the complex processes through which cultural traditions adapted to changing demographic and political circumstances. Archaeological evidence reveals continued worship of traditional Sumerian gods throughout the 2nd millennium BC, but these deities were increasingly understood within theological frameworks that incorporated Akkadian and Amorite religious concepts. Temple inscriptions and ritual texts demonstrate sophisticated theological synthesis that preserved essential Sumerian religious ideas while adapting to new cultural contexts. The architectural traditions established during the Sumerian period continued to influence Mesopotamian building practices throughout the 2nd millennium BC and beyond. Archaeological analysis of construction techniques and decorative elements reveals persistent use of traditional Sumerian architectural forms and engineering solutions in buildings constructed under Babylonian and later Mesopotamian dynasties. The ziggurat form remained the standard template for major religious architecture throughout Mesopotamian history, while domestic and administrative architecture continued to employ construction techniques and spatial arrangements that had originated during the Sumerian period. The technological innovations developed during the Sumerian period provided foundations for continued Mesopotamian leadership in engineering and manufacturing that persisted throughout the 2nd millennium BC. Archaeological evidence reveals ongoing use and refinement of Sumerian irrigation techniques, metallurgical processes, and craft production methods that maintained Mesopotamian competitive advantages in regional and international markets. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge preserved in Sumerian texts continued to influence scholarly activities and practical applications, including calendar systems, architectural planning, and commercial calculations. The international influence of Sumerian cultural achievements extended far beyond Mesopotamian boundaries through trade relationships, diplomatic contacts, and cultural exchange that transmitted Sumerian innovations to distant regions. Archaeological discoveries throughout the ancient Near East reveal Mesopotamian artifacts, architectural elements, and artistic motifs that demonstrate the widespread appreciation for Sumerian cultural achievements. The adoption of cuneiform writing systems by diverse peoples, including the Hittites, Hurrians, and Urartians, created lasting monuments to Sumerian intellectual achievements that preserved elements of Sumerian culture in regions far from their original homeland. The preservation of Sumerian mathematical and scientific knowledge within later Mesopotamian scholarly traditions ensured the transmission of crucial intellectual achievements that influenced scientific development throughout the ancient world and beyond. Archaeological discoveries of mathematical tablets and astronomical texts reveal sophisticated understanding of numerical relationships, geometric principles, and celestial phenomena that provided foundations for later Greek and Islamic scientific traditions. The sexagesimal number system developed by Sumerian mathematicians continues to influence modern timekeeping and angular measurement systems. The sexagesimal number system developed by Sumerian mathematicians continues to influence modern timekeeping and angular measurement systems, representing just one strand of an intellectual legacy that permeates virtually every aspect of human civilization. The innovations that emerged from the marshy lowlands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers between 4500 and 1600 BC, established fundamental patterns of human organization, technological development, and cultural expression that would prove remarkably durable across millennia of subsequent historical change. The invention of writing stands as perhaps humanity's most transformative intellectual achievement, fundamentally altering the nature of human communication, knowledge preservation, and social organization. The cuneiform system that emerged from Sumerian administrative needs around 3200 BC created the first permanent method for recording human language, enabling the preservation of complex information across generations and vast distances. Archaeological excavations throughout Mesopotamia have revealed hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets, documenting everything from mundane commercial transactions to sophisticated literary compositions, demonstrating the comprehensive scope of early literacy applications. The adaptability of cuneiform writing proved crucial for its widespread adoption throughout the ancient Near East. The script's flexibility enabled its successful adaptation for languages as diverse as Akkadian, Hittite, Hurrian, and Elamite, each requiring significant modifications to accommodate different grammatical structures and phonetic systems. This linguistic versatility created the ancient world's first truly international writing system, facilitating diplomatic communication, commercial relationships, and cultural exchange across vast geographical and cultural boundaries. Modern archaeological discoveries continue to reveal the extraordinary scope of cuneiform usage throughout the ancient world. The Amarna letters, discovered in Egypt and dating to the 14th century BC, demonstrate cuneiform's role as the diplomatic language of international relations, with correspondence between Egyptian pharaohs and rulers throughout the Near East conducted entirely in Akkadian cuneiform. Similar discoveries at sites from Turkey to Iran illustrate the script's function as a unifying communication medium that transcended local political and cultural boundaries. The legal innovations pioneered by Sumerian civilization established fundamental principles of jurisprudence that continue to influence modern legal systems. The Code of Ur-Nammu, dating to approximately 2100 BC, represents humanity's earliest known systematic legal compilation, establishing precedents for written law that prioritized compensation over retribution and created standardized procedures for legal proceedings. The code's emphasis on proportional justice and monetary compensation for injuries established principles that would be refined and expanded in later legal traditions, including the famous Code of Hammurabi. Sumerian legal concepts, including property rights, contractual obligations, and procedural justice, created frameworks for commercial and social relationships that proved remarkably durable throughout subsequent historical periods. Archaeological discoveries of commercial archives from Sumerian cities reveal sophisticated understanding of business law, including partnership agreements, credit arrangements, and dispute resolution procedures that establish templates for commercial relationships still recognizable in modern legal systems. The urban planning innovations developed by Sumerian cities created organizational patterns that became standard features of urban development throughout human history. The integration of residential districts, commercial areas, religious precincts, and administrative centers within planned urban layouts established principles of city design that continue to influence modern urban planning. Archaeological excavations at sites including Ur and Uruk reveal sophisticated understanding of infrastructure requirements, including water supply systems, waste management, and transportation networks that addressed fundamental challenges of urban life. The ziggurat form developed by Sumerian architects became the archetypal temple design throughout Mesopotamian history and influenced monumental architecture far beyond its original cultural context. The stepped pyramid structure that characterized ziggurats provided both practical and symbolic functions, creating elevated platforms for religious ceremonies while representing cosmic mountains that connected earthly and divine realms. Archaeological analysis reveals sophisticated engineering techniques, including drainage systems, foundation treatments, and structural reinforcement that enabled these massive structures to survive for millennia. The influence of Sumerian architectural principles extended throughout the ancient world through cultural exchange and adaptation. The stepped pyramid form appears in various modifications throughout the ancient Near East and beyond, with structures in Egypt, Mesoamerica, and Southeast Asia showing clear architectural relationships to Mesopotamian prototypes. Modern archaeological techniques, including ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, continue to reveal previously unknown examples of ziggurat-influenced architecture throughout regions that maintained contact with Mesopotamian civilization. Sumerian innovations in irrigation and agricultural management established technological foundations that enabled the support of large urban populations in arid environments. The sophisticated canal systems, water distribution networks, and drainage installations developed by Sumerian engineers created models for agricultural intensification that were adopted throughout the ancient world. Archaeological surveys using satellite imagery and ground-based investigation have documented extensive irrigation networks that demonstrate remarkable engineering capabilities and long-term environmental planning. The organisational systems required for managing large-scale irrigation projects created administrative innovations that became fundamental features of complex societies. The coordination of labour, resource allocation, and maintenance activities necessary for successful irrigation agriculture fostered the development of bureaucratic institutions and record-keeping systems that established templates for governmental administration. These organisational innovations proved essential for managing not only agricultural production, but also craft manufacturing, military operations, and commercial relationships. Modern agricultural techniques in arid regions continue to employ principles first developed by Sumerian engineers. Contemporary irrigation systems in the Middle East and other water-scarce regions utilize distribution methods, drainage techniques, and soil management practices that demonstrate clear continuity with ancient Mesopotamian innovations. The integration of agricultural planning with urban development that characterized Sumerian city-states provides models for sustainable development that remain relevant for modern planners addressing similar environmental challenges. The religious innovations of Sumerian civilization established theological and institutional frameworks that profoundly influenced subsequent religious traditions throughout the ancient world and beyond. The concept of patron deities protecting specific cities and territories created models for divine-human relationships that were adopted by later civilizations throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. The elaborate temple complexes that served as centers for religious, economic, and administrative activities established institutional patterns that influenced religious architecture and organization for millennia. Sumerian mythological narratives, including creation stories, flood accounts, and heroic epics, provided thematic and structural templates for later literary traditions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, though preserved primarily in Akkadian versions, drew extensively upon earlier Sumerian narrative cycles and established literary themes including the search for immortality, the relationship between civilization and nature, and the tragic limitations of human existence. These themes reappear throughout subsequent literary traditions and continue to resonate in contemporary cultural expressions. The theological concepts developed by Sumerian religious thinkers, including divine authority, cosmic order, and moral responsibility, created intellectual frameworks that influenced religious and philosophical traditions throughout the ancient world. The Sumerian understanding of divine justice, implemented through human institutions and natural phenomena, provided models for theodicy that were adapted by later religious traditions. Archaeological discoveries of religious texts reveal sophisticated theological reasoning that addressed fundamental questions about divine nature, human purpose, and moral obligation. The technological innovations pioneered by Sumerian craftsmen established manufacturing techniques and tool designs that remained standard throughout the ancient world. The development of the potter's wheel, around 3500 BC, revolutionized ceramic production and created manufacturing principles that continue to influence pottery techniques today. Archaeological analysis of Sumerian pottery reveals sophisticated understanding of clay preparation, firing techniques, and glazing methods that achieved remarkable consistency and artistic quality. Bronze metallurgy techniques developed by Sumerian metalworkers created alloy formulations and casting methods that established standards for metal production throughout the ancient Near East. The standardization of tool designs and weapon specifications that characterized Sumerian manufacturing created templates for mass production that enabled the equipping of large armies and the supply of extensive trade networks. Archaeological discoveries of metalworking installations reveal sophisticated furnace designs and production techniques that demonstrate remarkable technical expertise. The mathematical achievements of Sumerian scholars established numerical systems and computational methods that influenced mathematical development throughout subsequent history. The sexagesimal system's advantages for astronomical calculation and geometric measurement led to its adoption for specialized applications that persist in modern timekeeping and angular measurement. Archaeological discoveries of mathematical tablets reveal sophisticated understanding of arithmetic operations, algebraic relationships, and geometric principles that provided foundations for later mathematical traditions. Sumerian astronomical observations and calendar systems created frameworks for timekeeping and seasonal prediction that influenced agricultural planning and religious observance throughout the ancient world. The integration of lunar and solar cycles in Sumerian calendar systems addressed practical needs for coordinating agricultural activities with religious festivals, while maintaining astronomical accuracy. These calendar innovations were adopted and refined by subsequent civilizations and continue to influence modern calendar systems and astronomical calculation. The rediscovery of Sumerian civilization through 19th and 20th century archaeological excavations revealed the fundamental role of Mesopotamian innovations in human development and challenged previous assumptions about the origins of civilization. The decipherment of cuneiform writing by scholars including Georg Friedrich Grotefend and Henry Rawlinson opened vast archives of ancient texts that documented sophisticated administrative systems, literary achievements, and technological innovations that had been lost for over 2 millennia. Archaeological excavations, beginning with Paul Emil Botter's work at Khorsabad in the 1840s, and continuing through Leonard Woolley's discoveries at Ur in the 1920s, revealed the extraordinary material achievements of Sumerian civilization. The royal cemetery at Ur, with its elaborate burial goods and sophisticated metalwork, demonstrated levels of artistic and technical achievement that contradicted prevailing assumptions about ancient capabilities. These discoveries forced fundamental revisions in understanding of early human development and the origins of complex society. Modern archaeological techniques including radiocarbon dating, ground-penetrating radar, and satellite imagery continue to reveal new aspects of Sumerian achievement and influence. Recent excavations at sites throughout Mesopotamia have uncovered previously unknown cities, administrative centres, and technological installations that expand understanding of Sumerian territorial extent and cultural sophistication. Digital reconstruction techniques enable detailed analysis of architectural remains and artifact assemblages that provide unprecedented insights into Sumerian daily life and cultural practices. The influence of Sumerian innovations on subsequent Mesopotamian civilizations demonstrates remarkable cultural continuity despite political fragmentation and demographic change. The Babylonian Empire that succeeded Sumerian political authority maintained and refined administrative systems, legal traditions, and technological innovations that had originated during the Sumerian period. Archaeological evidence reveals continuous development of irrigation systems, urban planning techniques, and manufacturing processes that built upon Sumerian foundations while adapting to changed circumstances. The Assyrian Empire, despite its military focus and territorial extent, preserved and transmitted Sumerian cultural achievements through its library systems and educational institutions. The famous library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh contained extensive collections of Sumerian literary works, religious texts, and technical manuals that had been carefully copied and preserved for over a millennium. These archival activities ensured the transmission of Sumerian knowledge to later periods and facilitated its eventual rediscovery by modern scholars. Persian administration of Mesopotamia following the conquest of Babylon in 539 BC demonstrated continued recognition of Sumerian cultural achievements and their practical utility for imperial governance. Archaeological evidence reveals Persian investment in maintaining and expanding irrigation systems that had originated during the Sumerian period, while administrative documents demonstrate continued use of legal and commercial practices that trace their origins to Sumerian innovations. The intellectual legacy of Sumerian civilization extends far beyond its immediate geographical and temporal boundaries through the transmission of knowledge systems and cultural practices that influenced human development throughout subsequent history. The scientific and mathematical achievements preserved in Sumerian texts provided foundations for Greek intellectual development and ultimately influenced the emergence of modern scientific methods. The preservation of Sumerian astronomical observations and mathematical calculations in later Mesopotamian archives enabled their transmission to Islamic scholars and eventual incorporation into European academic traditions. Contemporary recognition of Sumerian achievements has transformed understanding of human development and the origins of complex society. Modern scholars recognize Sumerian civilization as the world's first urban society and acknowledge its fundamental contributions to virtually every aspect of human cultural development. The innovations in writing, law, urban planning, technology, and religious organization that emerged from Sumerian city-states established patterns of human organization that continue to influence contemporary society. The study of Sumerian civilization provides crucial insights into the processes through which human societies develop complexity and adapt to environmental challenges. The Sumerian experience of creating sustainable urban communities in challenging environments offers valuable lessons for contemporary efforts to address similar challenges, including resource management, environmental sustainability, and social organization. The integration of technological innovation with social cooperation that characterized Sumerian achievement demonstrates the importance of institutional development in enabling human societies to overcome environmental limitations and achieve unprecedented levels of cultural sophistication. The enduring influence of Sumerian civilization on human development represents one of history's most remarkable achievements, demonstrating how innovations emerging from specific geographical and cultural circumstances can transcend their original context to become fundamental features of human civilization. From the cuneiform tablets that preserve humanity's earliest literature, to the mathematical principles that continue to govern modern timekeeping, Sumerian innovations remain integral components of contemporary life. The sophisticated urban communities that emerged in ancient Mesopotamia established templates for human organization that continue to influence how societies address the fundamental challenges of coordinating complex activities, managing resources, and preserving knowledge across generations. In recognizing the Sumerians as the founders of civilization itself, modern scholarship acknowledges not merely their chronological priority, but their fundamental role in creating the intellectual, technological, and organizational foundations upon which all subsequent human achievement has been built.